something, hey, it's Soul, here's another video. It's not just another video. But yeah, anyway, what I'm going to do today is, for the first part of this stream, high stream, is respond to the 200 and some comments from yesterday's video, which, by the way, bombed. So yeah, I'm going to go through all of these. Actually, let's look at the worst ones, the ones that are held for review. Are there any? Oh, good. Oh, nice. There are not. Oh, at least not for this. At least not for this video. Usually, the ones that are held for review, those are like the worst of the worst. It's like F this, N-word this. Thankfully, nothing overtly racist towards me. It's usually just racist explicatives to, other invisible people on the internet. So here we go. Raphael S says, the only takeaway from this video is that you obviously bought a skip, and if you haven't bought a skip, you skipped 80% of the cutscenes, which means this isn't a deep dive at all. This ain't it, Chief. You can't play 14 like it's WoW, or else you won't enjoy it at all. If you think 14 is okay by just playing Shadowbringers, imagine if you actually gave it a fair shot. I describe myself as single-minded, and I wanted to like boom, 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 get through the story. Are you trying to tell me how I should be playing the MMO based on what's given? Screw you, dude. I know that there are optimal ways to play a game in order to succeed towards the end, but when it comes to like just the general enjoyment for someone who's diving in for the first time, I feel like there are, if I feel like if there's some like streaming the game, oh, it's my first time playing, like you're gonna have an audience that's playing backseat gamer, and be like, oh, go there, do this, do that, and it's cool interaction between streamer and audience to like help each other out. Like there's a lot of cool energy that happens from that, but I don't like that. That's why I'm such a bad streamer. I like having the naked and ooh, I totally screwed that up. To me, those moments are moments that you can't get back. Once you miss that opportunity, you don't really get that again. That's why, in raids, I don't look at guides or anything like that. I make guides, but I don't like follow other people's guides, because I want to be able to explore things and figure it out myself. And that's why if or when I do more episodes of this, like my ignorance of 14, if you thought it was bad now, man, you have no idea. But to clarify, and some people missed it, I guess, I did. This was like, oh god, months ago. Well before any of this happened. Was it even this year? I don't even know if it was this year. Maybe it was last year when I did it. But anyway, like I did skip Realm Reborn, and I didn't realize, I'm like, oh, I skipped all the raids and stuff too, because funny enough, when I started, I think I was at the end of Stormblood. And I was like, where's the raids, man? All I'm getting is these like single encounters. Like, what gives? And then I actually like looked something up, and I was like, oh, okay, there were raids, right? That's where they were. I'm like, oh, they're all optional. Yeah, I skipped a lot of stuff because I didn't, apart from like the paid skip or whatever, like I just ended up overlooking like so many things. I'll be interested in like going back, because there's like a new game plus option, and so I can go back and check out all the stuff that I missed. But I got to like level 40 something or other during Realm Reborn, and then I was like, I can't take this anymore. This is just too much, and so I paid to skip the rest of it and all that. And I paid for that Paladin job boost, which I think kind of messed with my perspective a little bit too in the outdoor world, but I don't think it was by much. Anyway, that was a long first answer to that comment, huh? It's my money, and I should play as others. You should play as others want. Crab says, I'll sum up these comments. You can't compare the games; they're totally different. But I need you to say the one that I prefer is. Yeah, that's about it. Might want to put no backseating on your tags or something. That's not. I mean, people people here in my chat, they don't really do that. So I think we all know better at this point. You know, I either gave off that vibe or I said it enough times, so it's not a big deal. But then I just noticed that like the people who watch these other videos, like they really like get into it, and you know, they ask each other for help. And again, I think that's a good thing. I think I was on stream when I was doing this when I was talking about this with you guys. I was like, oh yeah, there's stuff that I missed because I was starting Shadowbringers. And the game straight up said, hey, if you didn't do Crystal Tower, you should go back and do it. And I'm like, okay, I'll go ahead and do it. And so I started on some quests, and then people on stream were like, oh, dude, you're going to be here all day. And I'm like, oh, fuck it. Never mind. Never mind. So I'm pretty sure, because I'm getting close to the tail end of the Shadowbringers main storyline. There's like the big mountain thing, and then we're about to climb it. And I presume that, and I'm pretty sure there's a dungeon. And after that, I'm going to get a trial. And then, I don't know. And then something else is going to happen after that. But I'm pretty sure, like, that Crystal Tower stuff. I'm sure there were references that I already missed that have to do with that Crystal Tower thing. Linda Harris is a long-time commenter person. She says, thanks for your thoughtful commentary as always, Soul. Personally, I'm torn right now. I'm still a sub to WoW, but I simply can't bring myself to play it, taking a break while waiting on 9.1. I had to stop raiding and Mythic Plus this expansion due to health issues, and I'm just not finding anything compelling to do in game. I expected more depth to Shadowlands considering it's a whole new place, and yet I find myself not really caring at all about the native characters, including drawing me in and evoking an emotion. This does not include characters we already know. I mean the new NPCs native to Shadowlands and their lack of depth. I've not given 14 a try yet, so I can't make any comparisons there, but I have played WoW for over a decade and can compare how certain NPCs, through quests or side quests, make me care about what happens to them, etc. in previous expansions. This just doesn't seem to be present for me in Shadowlands, sadly. I'm finding myself wondering if WoW is still really an RPG, or is it beginning to morph into something more Diablo-esque, a very sparse story, and the main objective is to get the best gear. There's like so much RNG there, and get best times on greater rifts. They even managed to somehow ruin Torghast. The Torghast shown in the beta is not the Torghast that we got. Fun detected and fun killed, unless you play specific classes, that is. Oh well, sorry for the wall of text, and I'm hoping 9.1 will be more engaging. You know, there could have been cool opportunities like Soulbind quest lines, or otherwise just more side quests, because in terms of pure side quests, there just aren't a lot. There are very few side quests that don't deliver on giving more color to the world. Like, I notoriously remember this side quest with a little Swolkin person in Bastion that was so dull. It was a multi-chain quest line. It was part of an achievement, and I just couldn't stand it. I was like, this sucks. This sucks. Let's move on, though. The plot of Shadowbringers is to beat up 5 bad guys. Some people can read War and Peace and come away thinking it's a simple adventure story. So I said something along the lines of, because I was giving an anecdote. I was giving a brief anecdote, and I was referring to Shadowlands' main plot, which is to save everything. I could have wrote out long sentences to describe, they're trying to save the swords, because right now they're on the first, and they have to save the first because the first is being overwhelmed by this tidal wave of light. And I could get into all that stuff, but I just wanted to kind of cut to the chase and get to what it is I was trying to actually talk about, which is the pain in the ass that it is to get to these bosses and objectives. So the overall 5-point objective is to beat up 5 bad guys. And presumably, once all that's done, roll credits, or the bigger bad guy comes out, and then we smash that one, and then roll credits, something like that. There is, I actually, from last night, I can bring up an even better example. I'm at this part where I think I'm about to fight the 5th guy. And the 5th guy, he or she made his intro, and he's like, yeah, I'm the big bad guy. And he zips off to a place, and we need to get to that place. the landmines involved in order to get to this place. Okay, let me try to describe it if I'm remembering this correctly. So we try to get as close as we can, but to get to this guy, he's like way up in the sky. And so we're like, okay, what do we do? So we scout around, and then we talked, and then we encounter this village, and then they're filling us in on more stuff, and then we all get back together. We have a powwow and try to figure out what's going on. And someone's like, oh, I know what to do. Let's build a giant robot or build a giant construct, and then we'll just pull the mountain down, which I think is like awesome. But let's do that. And they're like, okay. And so people zip all over the planet. They get some help. Meanwhile, me the warrior light, I yeet off to somewhere else so I can get more of what we need. And so we encounter this village, and then in this village we need to pass some tests, or basically kiss their ass a little bit so we can get their help, and then they help us out, and then we all get back together, and then ta-da. That took a while to actually go through to go through all those motions, and it lets you connect to the characters. In between the cutscenes, there's lots of exposition that really talks about uniting the world and things like that. But it could have been abridged too, so that way all those beats could have been covered in such a way that I'm not just running around here, going there, running back here, going here, running back here, and going in circles. But it's not bad. I just find it annoying. I'm not saying it's bad at all. I remember one of my favorite quest lines in WoW, period. Made a video about it. It bombed. Story of my life. It's called Savior of Stoneplow. It takes place in Miss Pandaria, and in order to unlock, it's an optional thing, but in order to unlock it, you need to have done a certain number of quest lines throughout certain zones. And then from there, you unlock this Battle for Stoneplow, where basically this village is under attack by a giant bug and its army. It's like, oh crap, we need help. But then all of a sudden, all these different factions, people that you've been helping out along the way, they all start showing up, and then everyone gets into like this big ass brawl. And it's cool because it kind of makes light of the situation, but more than anything, it just celebrates what your actions in the world did. It helped to bring all these different peoples together, even people from like different races, different factions. They all came together, and you beat out the big bad bug because you get swallowed by it, and then you punch it from the inside and you make it explode. But that's I think that's cool, and it did it in Warcraft style, in a very fast manner, get to the point. But it sends all those messages. It sends all those messages together, not just from like the short little cutscenes, but like through little bits of dialogue that you see when you're delivering beer to all these different little encampments that are fighting back this invasion. And they're like, oh, beer? Hell yeah, this is a great place to live. Heck, this is awesome. And I thought that was cool. And then someone else is like, oh, I'm not too comfortable fighting alongside my enemies, but you know what? For this land, I'm gonna fight for it, and blah blah. Little beats like that. It's not thrown into your face. It's not forced in your face. And it's just it's just one way that we enjoy how story is being told. Big Tatsu says, you bought a skip. Yikes! No wonder you don't like the game. I never said I don't like the game. I said that the story is okay. And I think I'm spoiled by all the other games and Final Fantasies that I've played previously. To me, it's just another one. People talk it up like it's God, and I just think it's good. Menergy says, to me, having gone through almost all the story at this point, Final Fantasy XIV story is the most well-executed 5 out of 10 that I've ever seen. It's so boring. Damn! See, even I'm not being that cruel. I think it's good. I think it's good. But again, there are moments where things just drag out. When that moment where I unlocked the 5th guy, I expected the fight to be right there, and it wasn't. I'm like, okay, here we go. Here we go again. They're gonna lay down the freaking gauntlet before I can actually fight this guy. And then there's a dungeon, and then I get to fight the guy. But Yeah, that's just that's just how that goes. But like one of the big takeaways that I had from 14 is that it's an MMO and it's a Japanese style RPG. But when push comes to shove, the RPG comes first. Everything pauses, everything stops in favor of that, and that's what they decided. And so it's up to us to either suck it up and deal with it or not. And some people can't, and that's why they sell skips. That's why I chose one, because I kept hearing that, dude, the award-winning Heaven's Ward expansion is like awesome. And then when I finally got through it, I was like, hey, this was good. And so I'm glad I didn't skip it. Dun, 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 dun. Nate Gray says, hey Soul, I'll contribute the perspective of someone who considers Final Fantasy their all-time favorite series and is currently playing like 3 of them. OMG. Oh my god. Here we go, guys. TLDR, I almost completely agree. To me, 14's cardinal sin with storytelling that drags the experience down is that it does not trust the player with nuance or subtext of any kind at all. Okay, if a character has an emotion, insight, or information, then you will be hearing it in expository dialogue. It happens in really odd-paced and inopportune times. There are moments where I'm wrapping up a zone and heading towards a dramatic conclusion, and the character tells me that we have to have a meeting back at the base. I'll respond to that in a bit. It's like that friend that tags along to hang out on the town, has spicy food, and then needs to go right back to his apartment. As soon as you start gaining any kind of momentum, 14's stomach starts gurgling. It lets you know that it shouldn't have done so much gameplay so fast and needs to go back to the Waking Sands or Rising Stones for a big exposition dump. The only time a character withholds any kind of information is when there's going to be a betrayal or a twist later. All of them, they have those moments where it's like, okay, we did all these things, but they want to all go back to town to talk it through. And then I think I noticed this most with the patch sort of content, where you do stuff and then you go back to Waking Sands or Rising Stones or that house over in Ishgard, where the rich dude is. I forgot his name. 4 Tenths Manor, whatever. And I think in the case of patch content, that's okay, because right after the because I noticed that at the end of the patch content, you immediately start a quest right at that spot again. So it's more like we got a wrap up point, and so let's go ahead and come back to this, so that way we can have a proper conclusion to this quest line, and then you're done. So I think that's okay. I noticed there are too many excuses in Shadowbringers at least, to let's go back to the Crystarium because we gotta talk this through. We gotta talk about everything that's going on. Where it's like, I thought we have link shells and link pearls. I thought we can talk about all these things on the move. I thought that's I thought the convenient isn't it supposed to be more convenient that way? But the game ends up tying us back to go back to the Crystarium anyway, and so that's okay. But I did notice that too. It's like it was very predictable at one point. I'm like, okay, cool. I finished this area. I got another character back into my party, and now I'm probably gonna go back to base, right? Yep. Okay. Let's go. Let's go back. So in that case, it's predictable. I don't know if I would call it jarring or not. But it definitely has. But 14 definitely takes its time. It's not like, oh, we got to get to the next thing because there's some shit going on. Actually, Shadowlands sort of does that, because when you're done with the zone, you go back to Oribos. You talk with one of the dudes there, and they're like, so you finished there, and they told you to go to this other place. Okay, portal, please. Portal. Good. Go over there, champion of whatever the hell your planet is. Go ahead and help out the next people. Bye. So they kind of do that. It's very half-assed, obviously, but that kind of stuff does happen. Anyway, let's move on to the next part of this comment. Sheesh. The writers think you're too dumb to understand how magic and energy work, despite having borrowed from basically every Final Fantasy trope around. There's 4 different long cutscenes where they explain how tempering works, when I can explain it in a sentence. A primal's malevolent energy has a tendency to corrupt the life force of mortals and rob them of their individuality. There's a little more depth to it than that, but when that basic understanding is gained basically the first time you experience it just by looking at it, I can do with a little more trust from the story. This is just one example of something that happens all the time on various subjects. Not everyone has played all the Final Fantasies, or maybe even any of the Final Fantasies before hopping into 14. You know, they might be like, oh, JRPGs, those are stupid. And they just wanted to like jump into this, and then now they're playing through like this kind of JRPG experience for the first time. I did notice that they do tend to like re-explain things a little bit, but they also add a little bit to it as well, because it's like, okay, now, you know, it's like you know this part, but now let's add a little bit more to explain this like a little bit better. And they do it in such a way that the characters previously did not know these things, and so you're learning a little bit. I don't think it's super obnoxious. It also undercuts a lot of the game's moments. Spoilers for Stormblood. Watch out, guys. There's a scene where a man is holding up a building to save his friends. Said friends spend like 10... I know this one. Said friends spend like 10 minutes saying their fond farewells instead of, you know, escaping the building. Once outside, the leader of your crew says to check the river for the building guy. He's probably fine. The game can't help but immediately undercut all the impact and meaning of not only the previous scene, but of the scene coming down the line where that character returns. That's one of, to me, that's one of those moments where and you can't help it. All of the almost all of the cutscenes do not autoplay. The only kind of cutscene that autoplays where there's audio is when they're doing like those kinds of Vista explanations, usually when you walk into a new zone and then you have one of the characters say a couple of things. I think you know, this is only picking on one moment in the game, right? But I think at that point, having that sort of cutscene would have helped, because I do think it could have helped, where you would have a narrator talk about things, and then you would see all you would span across all the different characters. They're doing their emotes like no or something like that, and like, you know, and then the dude holding up the building is like shaking his head, making that communication unheard but very obvious. And then it kind of moves along. When you gotta play through it and read it all and all that stuff, it kind of breaks that moment. But again, I think point number 3 is like kind of small potatoes. Finally, my most recent and maybe now largest gripe is the fact that the story won't let me roleplay. In the early days of playing the game, I had a sense of this in how my character was often dictated to me, but I'd often shrug it off and still play out some of my personal RP. With the conclusions, Shadowbringers, and revelations of who you're actually playing as, writing my own RP stories for my character makes about as much sense as investing in RP for Cloud Strife as I play Final Fantasy VII. This is really frustrating to me because it undercuts a lot of the personal investment that I made into the game, and this is not something that either 11 or WoW has ever done to me. The ones where you make choices and then you decide what you want to say, whether you want to give one comment, another comment, or silence or whatever. I'm pretty sure you can skip those as well, and that undercuts that whole sense of to me that kind of undercuts the whole sense of roleplay, because no matter what you choose, the result is always going to be the same. Now, this is really hard to pull off in an MMO when you want to give choices that put you on like an entirely different path, and I'm not quite sure if Nate, right? If Nate is trying to give that sort of feedback, like he wants something like that, but I know it's really hard to pull off in the context of an MMO. I say this as someone who enjoys the story moments of Final Fantasy games and of games that have more of a visual novel leaning, like Fire Emblem, for example. Alternatively, here's some good stuff. World building is pretty good. This is often experienced more in the side quest or job quest. I really enjoyed a lot of those moments. There's still times where it needs work, though. I counted like 4 different Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer side quest stories in Stormblood alone, which I have no idea what those are. I genuinely get a chuckle and enjoyment out of the awful Manderville quests. I'm not sure whether to recommend them or tell you to stay as far away from them as you can. I have a feeling those are side quests, which I've stayed away from every side quest ever. This game is a kind of greatest hits of Final Fantasy, which means if you like the series, then there's going to be some kind of something that you enjoy about it. I know that I missed tons and tons of Easter eggs. Like, the only one that really stands out for me was when, hey, that's Cyan's music. Whenever you go to Doma, or whenever you talk with Hien, that one dude with the sword and he's shirtless or whatever. I thought that was cool. And why not? I mean, Final Fantasy has 30 some odd years of its games to go back to. There are clear references and clear inspirations that come from the old games. And so, why not have some more of the rest to make people happy? Basically, both games have good points and bad points. I just hope both games can be successful. That's the takeaway! I'm really put off by the whole one game needs to win. And one game needs to, lose or whatever. Why can't we just play games? And what's the worst that's going to happen? Oh, no. WoW is sunk to number 2. God. Let me wipe tears with all my money. Well, which one is better? Yeah. My team's got to win. Don't you know the internet is a zero-sum game? There are only winners and losers. A critic will take the community and the word community, and they will swing that shit around like a club in order to push their agenda. Don't you know the majority of players don't care about Raid Finder? And it's that same sort of argument. And one thing that one of the comments here, I'll read it eventually, but so here's kind of a spoiler. They pointed out that the main story ends at the end of the leveling experience, and then everything else is just kind of supplementary. It's a follow-up, and a lead into the next expansion. And I think that's a great method of storytelling, because it lets the player, the viewer, viewer/player, feel like they come to that conclusion right away. They know what they're getting into. The story ends, cool, and then everything else is coming after that. WoW is episodic though. They work in an episodic format where it's this first part is the long intro. It's okay, we got this set up, we beat the Nathrius, what's next? And we have all these conversations about, what's the final boss going to be like going down the line. And I think that in a more ideal world, if it wasn't for 2020 and we got good patch cadence, we probably would have had a much better flowing story that just kind of moves along without the fatigue of waiting. Unfortunately, that's not how it turned out, and that's where some of the exhaustion of Shadowlands comes from. That we haven't moved on to new stuff. We only had a 905 patch, and that's it. So that really turns people off. Alfredo Vicente says, I must say, man, thank you for finally putting out a true neutral review of both games in a way that you only know how. I did miss the little robot dude. Blizzard adds to the game, as you mentioned before, evergreen systems like a true out-the-box unique player housing system, a revamped profession system that also ties deeply into the crafting system, dies for our transmogs, and all this connected to the all this connected to the content that has been created. Wow, that would be it. Other than that, Blizzard just needs to release content in a more polished and timely fashion and manner, and listen to its community, because we're all still waiting for our Tinker class, right? Master of Death. Here, please. Lord Budding says, deep dive when it's only 20 minutes of Shadowbringers footage. What about character development and world and lore building? Yeah, whatever. I appreciate the effort, but don't just name this deep when you have no Realm Reborn, Heavensward, Stormblood footage, and you are not explaining the journey from 1 to 80, the building and the payouts and the foreshadowing. Because I'm talking about the storytelling method, not the story. But I guess I could have been twists and stuff like that. I guess I could have talked about that. And as for footage, yes, I could have used more than just the stream footage and captured footage from the past 2 weeks. But unfortunately, Twitch deletes all my old shit. Brett Woods says, no hate. When I saw the thumbnail, I was like, too cringe. Not you too, Soul. Because it's still Soul I watched. Glad I did. Very nice comparison. I love the parallel to Contra. The video also changed my mind. I've seen so much WoW vitriol recently, I've been wondering if I should consider playing 14. I love the JRPG world, but not as an MMO. But now I'm going to hang tight and just stick with my casual RP in WoW. From this video's information, I think it will be more fun that way. Player housing, Blizz, player housing. Now, like I said, the story is... I think I had said in that video that the story content is good enough that I'd be like, dude, why don't you just make an offline version and I'll just play that. So the follow-up idea that I would have would be, I'll just wait until the latest expansion is on sale, right? I'll buy it when it's on sale, and then I'll just play through it just so I can get to the end of like all the story and patch content. If I happen to not care about the MMO side of things, like, you know, let's grind dungeons for this, or let's raid for prestige and stuff like that. If you don't care about that, then just buy it on sale and then play through the stuff, and then when your month of game time is over, you know, you're done. Or you might get caught up in it, and then you might start enjoying the MMO aspects of it. Like, that's totally fine. So yeah, I would say, like, if this person like likes JRPGs, try it out. Try out some emulated games too. Breath of Fire, sweet couldn't. I think what helps 14 story, aside from the writing, is the absence of a PTR and a beta. You're going to each patch and expansion completely blind. That has a certain appeal. That's a different conversation altogether. But yeah, like we know the story going in, and that takes a lot away. I remember when they released a patch 8.2.5, where, you know, the short fight between Sarfang and Sylvanas, like, people were like, ugh, that's it. You know, there was very little that happened in that particular patch, but everyone was glued to the internet so they can comment on it and things like that. And, you know, it was a shared moment, and I thought that was really cool. And they encrypted everything. They really didn't want people to spoil them, to be spoiled as to like what happens there, and I thought that was a cool moment. People like to gatekeep, and if you have not played the story, and it's sad, but they are a minority of people, albeit a vocal minority. Oh yeah. Markup says, so ... you complain that the 14 MSQ doesn't let you fight stuff, but the moment you get to kill stuff, you complain. Yeah. ... Moving on. ... The thing that makes me salty is that you used a skip. Your helmet of shame is appropriate, but, well, ... can't be helped. ... Oh, that... Dude, did you not play through the intro for Shadowlands and go through, like, 30 to 50 long minutes of, let's walk through the Crystarium. Check it out, dude. It's vendors and a mailbox and a library and an underground thing, and now go off and solve problems. Okay. Where are the problems at? Oh, there's a big thing over there, or, you know, a big kingdom castle thing over there with airships and stuff. And I remember thinking to myself, I wonder what's gonna get in my way to just go over there. And I complained because that was the first thing that you fight. Bugs. There were things that I could have fought along the way. Like, I could have aggroed something. I'd be like, oh, I'm going to kill that thing. You know, there's that. But then the first thing I was told to kill were bugs. Bugs. Anyway, I do think you are biased, which is to be expected. I freely admit that. You played WoW for years, like you said, and for 14 for, I don't know, a month. No, that is not true. I played off and on for several months, actually. I just stop a lot because I'm like, dude, this Realm Reborn thing is rough. So yeah, I played over a period of months, and then I quit for a long time, and then I played for another period of, like, I guess, weeks, and then I bought the skip because I was like, screw Realm Reborn, I'm tired of it. I started Heaven's Ward because I was told it's great. You know, it flows totally differently. I didn't feel that way at all, and I was like, dude, I'm doing the same thing. I'm walking here, teleporting there, walking here, and then I ran into I needed to get into a trial, and no one would sign up. No one was playing at the time for some reason. I don't know. but I couldn't start the trial, and I wasn't knowledgeable about like the group finder or whatever the party finder is, and so I stopped. I'm like, screw this, I'll come back to this another time. But then I just stopped playing for a long time, and then I came back, and here I am. So yeah, that's the quick story. Your points are valid though, and the backgrounds of both games are interesting, especially since I haven't touched any other Final Fantasy game. In the end, it boils down to a very simple thing: your own preference. Now that's a good take, and to find out that you'll have to play both games. I played WoW since the end of BC, almost without breaks, and I've stopped over a year ago to switch over to 14. I'm casual too, haven't played Mythic or Savage Extreme, and personally I found WoW lacking when it comes to its own lore. Seems to me WoW has trained its audience not to care, and if you happen to still care, go read the books and pay for them. The interesting lore bits all take place in the books, the characters shine in the books. I always thought, oh well, it's a game, an MMO, at that it's difficult to give these characters the space that they need. And then I went on to Final Fantasy XIV as it was introduced into how it can work and work well. Yes, the pixie explaining how mail works, that was strange, but on the other hand, this feature gets to be important in 5.2. Don't spoil me. Yes, 14 explains every feature with some lore behind it. Personally, I love it. I love to know how it is that I can use crystals for teleportation. I love to know that mail doesn't just pop out of nowhere, but that's just stuff that not everyone needs or likes or bothers about. I never liked the fact that my character couldn't even rent a room and was thrown from one battle to the next, not even thinking about whether that was a good idea or no, whether it was justified or no. At least in Final Fantasy XIV, those questions are asked. In WoW, you just fight, doesn't matter what or why, you just fight. What can I say? It wasn't my cup of tea, and I only stayed despite everything I had fun. When that was gone, well, ... But everyone has to make that decision for themselves, and many people are still enjoying themselves in WoW. And WoW has a current content drought, not the first, not the last, so people check out other games. I don't really know why there's such a fuss, but still, I like your style, so hopefully you remain in good health for the next part. Mental health. Because this can be mentally draining. Yeah, it started off like, hey man, and then it ended up being a pretty solid take, so I appreciate that. Aelwyn says, the one thing I think would make you enjoy more, unless you're doing it already, is to hide hats before going into a cutscene. Your character, especially in the last 2 expansion, has way more facial expressions that just add into the emotional value of these cutscenes. That is true. And there was a point during Shadowbringers where I did swap out helmets. And at that moment, that's where I was like, oh, I gotta get off my ass and figure out how glamour works. And so I did. And now I changed it, and now I just look like now I'm just a goof with the helmet thing, because that's how I like to present my character in 14 as just a faceless doofus. That's what I want. Sounds dumb, but my fucking character. Ian Inaki says, a nice video. I think you kind of touch on this point, but I don't see it as Final Fantasy being great at storytelling and Blizzard being terrible. I think there are different kinds of stories. To me, Final Fantasy stories are fun, but there's no clever craftsmanship behind them. It's all fairly standard stuff like, oh, this person turned out to be evil. You can say that somewhat about Blizzard as well, and I'm certainly not saying that Final Fantasy is 100% predictable stories. I think the thing, though, is that Blizzard writes stories as lore. This is like Lord of the Rings. You could say it's standard storytelling, but what makes it great is all the extra thought that was put into the world building behind the story. I don't feel like Final Fantasy tends to put this much thought into world building, although I must say I haven't played the MMO. You say that all the story is outside of the game, but to me it's like saying all the story of Lord of the Rings is in the Cimmerian. Even if the player doesn't have the full context without reading the books, you can still feel the reverberations of this inside the main story. I like that line. Even if the player does not have the full context without reading the books, you can still feel the reverberations of this inside the main story. But, I mean, I still get the pushback on it. I guess for me, doing great lore makes a story much more interesting because you can keep on being fascinated trying to figure out who is doing what and how and why this is all matters in the universe. By the way, this comment is more of a defense of WoW than any criticism of Final Fantasy, which I played a few of the games, but not a mega fan for anything. I could tell, but it's okay. Another thing I'll say in response to your comments about WoW being a breakneck fast-paced combat game, well, I think this is maybe underselling it a bit too. I think that it comes back similar to action movies. What makes an action movie good? Many people would say how good are the action scenes, but I actually disagree. The reason you care about the action is because of the story. Take Die Hard. It's great because you know it's Christmas, and the stakes are really high because if he dies, then his wife and kids will have a depressing Christmas. And this is why MO, it's considered one of the great action movies. The same thing with WoW. It's because you have all the lore. It's because of all the lore that you care about the action. When I killed Arthas, it was a really big deal to me because I was thinking about it for years, how he betrayed us all, and that I wanted to revenge, for example. If it was the same boss fight in another game, I just don't think I would have cared nearly as much. DVJ Labonte says, congratulations, now you've unlocked I need views. Let's do the same thing everyone else is doing. Duty failed, providing anything compelling. Duty failed, attaining anything without paying for it. Duty failed, your audience attention. It's okay. We will res you. Find life anew, but first remove your Blizzard colored glasses. It's very cringy. Sorry. Aaron says, I really appreciate your videos and how you're able to give your opinion on the pros and cons in a somewhat neutral tone and haven't jumped on the hate train like so many other people have. It's true that negativity sells in this market, and I just want to say thank you for not selling your soul for a few extra YouTube views. Just an FYI, this video bombed. Okay. Hiruma Reddish says, so this is what the new #1 MMO looks like. Fadrian Filatoli says, I totally butchered the name. He says, thanks, Soul. Nice to see that kind of format. Really liked it. Thanks. Nathaniel Cohen says, really hit the nail on the head with this one. Maybe in a future episode you could dive into the specifics of this with characters and their arcs and some sort of world building. That could be a very interesting conversation that would be similar to this one while still having many unique points. Kermit says that sometimes WoW story beats moves too fast. The whole War of Thorns pre-patch and Ny'alotha should have been their own expansions, not small patches. I agree with the Ny'alotha part, but I also can't deny that there's been references to N'Zoth and Ny'alotha in numerous story beats, books, patches, and so on and so forth. This was, people look at 8.3 as, wow, that's it for N'Zoth, and the way I see it, 8.3 was just the conclusion of everything that had built up before then. And if you didn't pay attention, that's kind of Blizzard's fault too. But there's a chance that you didn't pay attention to it. I guess I should say it like that. Do I think N'Zoth was underused, by the way? I think overall, yes. I think that there could have been more done with N'Zoth to make him into like kind of a proper villain. But again, like there's been all sorts of inferences to him over the years. That's, I think we can move on from it. Okay, so Umko Inji says, I don't think it matters a lot how WoW tells its story because the quality of the story just isn't that great. Almost any focus on story has been detrimental to the game, in my opinion. For example, Shadowlands storytelling is quick and gameplay focused, but it still makes the game more linear and restricted, just to focus on extremely uninteresting characters and events. It wouldn't help if more time was spent on learning to know these characters because they are not well-written characters worth knowing. The only story device that Blizzard seems to be able to use properly is the environment design, which we highlighted too, and I think it should be left to just that. Like I said, 14 story has its problems, but it's fundamentally an interesting story with some fantastic characters. I agree that it mostly averages out to just being good, but at least for me, it does make me care more about the world, and perhaps most importantly, my main character. I've never felt that in WoW, where my characters feel more like hero units in a strategy game, while the badly written Blizzard heroes get all the focus. He said that the gameplay parts of the MSQ in 14 is really bare bones for the most part, and I completely agree. But I think that's not the point. Past Realm Reborn, the MSQ fully focuses on storytelling and cuts out almost everything else, while the other patch content goes to gameplay pretty quickly. The point of the MSQ is to give you the context, while dungeons, trials, and raids give you the gameplay. They are separated for sure, but for me, the connection to the world of my character that I get through the MSQ enhances the gameplay parts. Also, I think the gameplay in trials and raids will be better than you're expecting when you get to them. 14 can be seen as the story-focused game and WoW as the gameplay-focused one, but I genuinely think 14 doesn't fall behind in the gameplay department at all. The MSQ doesn't give an idea of how good the fights can really be, which definitely is a problem with the game. Still, because of the level sync system, you can properly enjoy all the content the game has offered since Realm Reborn, which is not the case in WoW. I've yet to really get into the gameplay side of things. I really don't think I've learned much from the dungeons that I've run. It's like you go into the dungeon, either pull slow or go from wall to wall, AoE stuff down, and like that's it. But then that's how it is. It's level in dungeons. WoW's no different. You just kind of go through and like that's it. Once you have a good sense of what you're doing. If anything, I would say the classic era games do a better job at low level dungeon stuff because it feels a little bit more challenging than it does by average. That's just me though. Freefy says, really enjoyed this and your thoughts. Thanks. After playing since Warcraft 3, I thought to give 14 a chance. Nope, the storytelling is not for me. I played an hour and I only could control my character for 5 minutes. Cutscenes are too long. The dialogue style is terrible, and I was not interested. I thought maybe I was wrong and did something wrong within the game, but I see it's not the case. The game is like that, so I'll try other MMOs and will continue to play WoW. 14 is not for me. Britt Johnson says, to paraphrase another content creator, world building and storytelling are different beasts. I'm a 14 fan, and I think its story is compelling. I enjoy the FF franchise as a whole, and I actually loved the intro quest to Shadowbringers, if only that they show the developers consider the storyline problems of going to the first. WoW doesn't care if Draenor, the alternate Draenor, and the Shadowlands make sense. They're there to set up the game, not the story. So story-wise, I think Final Fantasy XIV wins. Subjective, of course, but you hit the nail on the head. When I'm in Stormwind, a kid runs by, a toy dealer wanders around. Even the empty cities have neat little things that you don't notice at first. Kugane is a huge, empty city. It doesn't feel alive. Suramar, on the other hand, isn't even a player hub, but there's merchants, there's little vignettes. 14 may put you in a fantastic story arc with little Easter eggs to 1.0 and other FF titles, but WoW has Easter eggs in the forms of players and devs in the game, not part of any story, just living there, because it's up to you to create the story of the hero of Azeroth. I wish 14 had a little bit more meaningless things like Pooh and Friends in the BFA. Other creators are definitely in one camp or the other. It's obvious enough without pointing out who's over WoW, who's considering their long-term channel ramifications and the gamos that they're playing. I enjoyed you not going all in before the flop, so to speak. The flop? Oh. One last thing, WoW can be the victim of its own success. I remember visiting that isle off Booty Bay to check the weather for a pet and title several times a day to complete the Zookeeper achievement, or going to Kara daily for that stupid horse that still never dropped. But after 300 mounts and 500 pets, they don't feel meaningful, it's just one more. Most new 14 players and refugees have a handful of mounts, and they're still meaningful. People tend to overlook the crazy little things, the B mount grind, Chromie's quest, the mailroom sword, and even the jousting of the Origin tournament, or the jousting of Kata. All these little things that require development and implementation are taken for granted. Sure, Golden Saucer is amazing, and the Darkmoon Fair hasn't been interesting since the Rabbit, but if you look across the landscapes, WoW has so many little side events, the secret mounts and pets. It's a secret, not another recolor. 14 simply doesn't have that kind of content, and to tie it to my first point, it makes the world a deeper and fuller experience. Yoshi P has bemoaned his budget compared to WoW, but that's not an excuse. 14 fans are celebrating being able to play a male version of a character race, while complaining about how garbage the allied races in WoW are. Let's be fair. It seems you're trying to and look forward to your next installment. The whole thing about the numerous mounts and pets and all that, like I've been hearing more and more about how like there's so many that it feels that it feels meaningless, and it's hard to agree with that because a lot of them are like recolors, and like how do you do that? Like if someone is like, dude, this horse is dope, I wish this horse was brown instead of purple, or I wish this horse was purple instead of brown. And maybe you guys can correct me. Maybe you can dye mounts in 14 and you can't. Yeah, so what's the fucking problem? If the cool thing about WoW mounts and pets are that if there's a, there are multiple colors, you can get the ones that you like and not care about the other ones because you want that one. Sweet. Transmog is a different story. The whole dice system and all that stuff, that's been beaten to death, and maybe we'll revive it and beat it to death again, and that's totally fine. Michael Pate says, I have to say, this is the most uniquely negative take on the Final Fantasy XIV that I've ever heard. It's the most uniquely negative take. Let's read on. WoW leveling is just sort of a random collection of unconnected zones. It doesn't matter where you came from, and it doesn't when you leave or where you go. I think this person did not play Shadowlands. 14 leveling takes you from level 1 to level 80. Am I going to comment on every line this guy says? Final Fantasy XIV leveling takes you from level 1 to level 80. I read that line and I think to myself, like, is this like a high school essay where he's like, yeah, Final Fantasy XIV is a video game from the company called Square Enix. Square Enix makes video games, and Square Enix was once upon a time Square, and then it became Square. I'll stop. Sorry. Let me get to the thing. The story sends you somewhere and then sends you back. The people you meet matter more as you interact with them over and over again. When you actually go into combat, it isn't just because a quest giver wants you to collect bear parts. No, maybe I want to collect train parts, or maybe I want to collect rocks so that someone else can sift through them and then find a thing out of them. But anyway, when I leveled in WoW for the first time during 3.0, I didn't do a single dungeon in a group where I wasn't carried. It's different now, but I could still solo to max level without interacting with another player. You can't do that in 14. Well, in Shadowbringers, I've done most of the dungeons with the trust system, but whatever. Oh, here we go. Nick Gray. Nick Gray says, I love all the Shadowbringers without interacting with another player, and the trust system is honestly one of the best things that happen, but you can't use the trust or the squadron in I don't know what that is. Yuri Antunes says, you have won for good my respect. You're one of the few that I know that played Suikoden, which is for me one of the best series of JRPG ever. You have a great taste in classical soul. I'm looking forward to more content. Thank you, Jonathan Ramos. Dan Archer writes, I just started 14 last night and early this morning, and I gotta say, not immediately going into combat and getting all bloody was a bit jarring. Like being ready for a gangland style takedown, and instead all the NPCs are like, look at this, and you can go over there and get me some stuff from that vendor, and while you're there, give a $1 to that guy. A little bit different than what I'm used to. That being said, I really do like the way 14 presents its story quests. The many cutscenes don't bother me in the least, not yet anyway, and the somewhat slower playstyle is actually a nice change. I've been a little lost in WoW for a few years because I don't have a guild and none of my friends play anymore. Plus, I only have a little time per week to play, so I'm left to do solo content. And I gotta say, it's not as entertaining as it used to be. The world quest helped at first, but now it's practically mandatory, and so less fun. 14 by its nature is a bit more for soloists, or so I've been told, and so I'm looking forward to seeing where the game takes me. I'll probably still play WoW, but with maybe a few longer breaks from it for 14. I like the idea of there being multiple great games, not just one or two. Good take. Multiple great games. A response, it initially is a change of pace, then all of a sudden it throws you into some craziness and then calms down and builds up again. Personally, I love the way the story is told. As for it being more for soloists, it can be whatever you want. As a soloist, you can be a fisherman, or you can queue solo for almost anything. Everything aside from the most competitive content is queuable solo via the duty finder. You don't need a pre-made or a guild to take part in these things. Cool. I have to agree that one thing WoW does that burns my biscuits is burn through content. I prefer a slow burn and not killing every major bad guy every patch. The Legion expansion should have ended with the cutscene after we returned from killing Kill Jaden and we look up at Argus in the sky, thus leading into the next expansion and giving our invasion of Argus a proper story and build up over the full course of an expansion. I agree. The same should have been done with Ashara being the last boss in an expansion leading into the next one, with N'Zoth being its last boss, not both crammed into the same expansion last couple of raids. Yeah, I would have been perfectly happy if the last thing you do in BFA was 8.25, the fight between Sarafang and Sylvanas. That, to me, after that scene, roll credits, done. You know, maybe before that there could have been like some sort of raid like content or whatever. But yeah, that could have been it. Leveling in WoW is not fun either. You're just you're just a pleb for WoW. Thank you, Daniel Henry. Skull Shouties says, I can't speak on behalf of 14, but Warcraft did a terrific job of making me care and love the characters presented from Reign of Chaos all the way to Battle for Azeroth. In a certain way, you get nostalgic and rooted into these characters for a while. The books certainly help, but even if I go purely off the RTS, I found myself really falling in love with the characters and wishing to see their stories continue. I mean, it's a totally different beast when you're looking at like the RTS storytelling versus normal JRPG storytelling. It's entirely it's entirely different, but it's my take on it. When it comes to storytelling, I feel WoW has done 15 years of potential disservice to players. As you said, every expansion you're thrust into fighting over I don't like green guys. Well, that's a little close-minded, I gotta say. WoW rewards its players with stuff. Fight stuff, craft stuff, mission table stuff, and it does so from minute one. This stuff continues to happen. More stuff gets added, and the game design itself encourages players to run from level 1 to 60 as quickly as possible, so the player can get all the stuff. Side comment, I leveled from 1 to 80 fast. I'm sorry, well, boost and all that, you know, that kind of messed things up. But I wanted to level quickly so I could get a handle of all the abilities that my class, or I'm sorry, that my job is going to get as a paladin. I'm still a ways done. It's still a ways until I'm done with everything. But you know, my guy hit level 80 like a good while back, and I was like, oh, this is it, huh? Okay, that's cool. I could have leveled another job. That would have been a smart thing to do, to go back and level up so I could have another job to get all that sweet quest XP from. But then I'd be lying to myself because I know that I would never play this job anyway, so who cares? But it did feel kind of empty because I got to 80, but then as I'm going through the story beats and like the duty quest lines and stuff like that, I get synced down, and so my awesome ass level 80 skill gets taken away. I'm like, okay, let's keep going. Anyway, let's move on. For about 15 years, this has been WoW's modus operandi. This has been WoW's MO. That is an entire generation of players who only know of WoW's way of making MMORPGs, but wasn't always the case. EverQuest, Ultima Online, any number of mods, SWTOR to an extent, Star Wars Galaxies are all less about rushing each level cap for all the stuff, and more just, you know, doing things. You're plopped into a world and told, okay, go do whatever. But not WoW. WoW says, hurry up, you got raids to farm. For all those players whose sole MMO experience is WoW, 14 is not going to feel good. You're forced to engage with the story. If you don't like the story in WoW, who cares? You have raids to farm and arenas to complain about. If you don't like the story in 14, though, you're kind of fucked. Playing MMORPGs and RPGs outside of WoW takes a player breaking themselves from WoW habits. 14 forces the player to sit through downtime. It forces the player to engage with context, even if the player just skips all the dialogue and cutscenes. And for those who have primarily played WoW, this is a hard sell. It biases the player because WoW demands all of your time. It demands you make appointments every day to play. Speak for yourself, bro. And it throws you into the breakneck race to the top. That's great if you like it, but most of us are just conditioned to it instead. If that's the kind of game you prefer, more power to you. You're probably going to like Destiny and Call of Duty and League of Legends too. If the player prefers a slower pace with more focus on storytelling, you might consider giving games outside of WoW a try. When you sync in WoW, the same thing happens. That's true, but syncing is optional. When I'm playing through like those duty scenarios where I'm leveled down, I'm gonna get into that in maybe some other episode. But the premise is that 14 plays it so safe that I don't feel like a gamer. Does that make sense? Because like for someone like me, like in JRPGs or whatever, I like to power level. I want to take the time to be a beast, and you know, when I get to this new area, I want to suck it up of all of its resources, and I want to farm all this, you know, and I want to make hella gold or whatever the money is, or power up my skills, or get enough levels before before the diminishing returns really kick in, and then I'll go into the next area and I'll just whop everything, like I'll just waste all that lay before me, and that feels good. I can celebrate a little bit of my efforts. And 14 doesn't do that, unfortunately. Like, in the outdoor world, if I'm doing, like, basic quests and stuff, okay, cool. I'm smoking everything. That's nice. But that's how I'm getting the experience anyway. I can't celebrate that in the main story beats, though, because it'll knock me down to whatever level. And if I recall correctly, I also can't take that into the required dungeons. I think you'll have to correct me if I'm wrong there, and I may be wrong. Let's see. Komar disagrees with one point. That is that if you don't like the story, you're kind of fucked. I know some people who barely engage with the story and are years-long players and just love it. But people are weird. But the game offers exactly what you say, a different pacing. You can rush to 80, but the game isn't going to tell you that's the thing to do, and you end up feeling you somehow missed a lot. Stuff, yes. WoW is all about the stuff. The day I left, I had the proverbial 11 different Azerite helms in my bag. I didn't miss kissing that junk goodbye. That's one of the reasons I love RPing in WoW, because it doesn't hold my hand and dictate my pacing. I'm free to experience it on my terms. As Soul said, like the other games that focus on gameplay, your story is made in the gameplay. I leveled in each starting zone in WoW various times, but I have always enjoyed and cultivated different experiences and role-playing because of how freeform it is. The same was very true of 11, which I would not characterize as a breakneck race to the top game at all. It was just a very freeing game. That's why 14 can be really disappointing at times when I want to just experience things and they're locked behind endless story prerequisites and other chores. The amount of times I want to do something but the objective is behind a red locking key, or want to play it with friends and can't because I wasn't synced with their progress, is more than I care to recount. One of the things Conjurous George says, one of the things I super agree with is the mob placement. My god, at every throw of a stick there's a mob in 14, and there are very few things I don't really like about zone design but it's more because of the engine limitations. I refuse to buy into the fact that, because of the limitations to our engine, mobs are just dotted here and there. I mean, maybe he's referring to that, the fact that by and large, mob placement in 14, it just feels like really lazy. Like, mobs don't move together. They don't seem to, there's no coordination, and the placement just feels random. If I were to twist it, if I were to play mental gymnastics, I would say but then it's kind of like having the random encounter system in the other Final Fantasy games where you just go in one direction and then you run into random. That's me trying a little bit too hard. Dracongus with another comment says, yes, totally true that WoW is much more action-oriented. I've heard it said that 14 is an RPG first and an MMO second, while WoW is an MMO first and an RPG second. The second half of that statement, I'm not sure, because I think there are a lot of things that are lacking on the RP side of things. Ralph2449 says, honestly, I can't imagine WoW ever competing in a story sense with 14. WoW players and developers would be scared of really long cutscenes, but really long cutscenes is what makes characters feel real and deep. You hear them talk, express emotions, feelings, have great facial animations. Honestly, in just Shadowbringers, a single expansion, Emmett Selch? I thought it was Selch. Anyway, he appears and he is such an emotional, fun, and great character that you slowly feel connected to. Right now, as I'm playing it, he feels so obnoxious. But anyway, now compare that to WoW, where most WoW dialogue is silly explanations as to what's happening. Oh, look, they're attacking us from above. Quick champion, follow me to escape. And let's not even go to the completely cringy area of bad guys and heroes, which dialogue revolves around children's show statements like "We will stop you, bad guy," or the beam of friend. Well, that sounds not very good faith. Sorry, but WoW feels simply unable to compete at any level of character depth, and that is coming from someone who reads all the books. No WoW characters ever make me feel emotional compared to characters in 14, because WoW characters are rarely ever given enough time with deep facial animations and cutscenes to talk like humans, instead of caricatures of the good guy, and the good guy who's a cultist, or the evil bad guy. Honestly, after playing 14, I simply can't take WoW's story as seriously. It's cool to see events like what Sylvanas is doing, but characters just feel so silly and detached to me. It's fight time! Welcome to the Octagon, guys. Let's do this. Okay, bro, not to be mean, but the lore of 14 is just a bunch of Deus Ex Machinas, magic mumble jumble, and a bunch of gods that appear one after another, each stronger than the one before, very much like Dragon Ball Z. Just think of the lore of Emmett. So he said... Spoiler alerts, probably great, but I'm doing it. Just think of the lore of Emmett, who's like one of the bad guys. Let's just go with that. So he summons Zodiac, which consumes half of the lives of the planet in the process, and then they plan on defeating him the other half. But then someone else summons Heidelin to control Zodiac, and this causes reality to be fragmented. Oh, and don't forget how they throw the literal moon over the planet. Oh, and that the current Emmett is himself a cloned body of his old host. This is overly complicated for the sake of it, which I admit is a very common thing in anime, but I don't think this is really that cool when applied to a game that you have to play. As a movie, a show, or a book, it would be cool, but for a game, it's unnecessarily convoluted. Oh, man. Oh, yeah, they're in it. These guys are in it. Oh, fight. Okay, anyway. I don't really see any of those as a negative or convoluted. That is how much you build depth and make characters interesting. Regarding Emmett and his backstory, I am sure we'll be learning more about it because that convoluted thing is just a really basic and non-specific story. There are things we still need... Wait. That convoluted thing is just really a basic and non-specific story. Wait, but then isn't that like one of the big beats? Anyway, there's still things we need answers for, and secondly, the fact that he prefers his old body and uses clones is really understandable and probably normal if he is attached to said appearance, which I will agree he looks fabulous. So that's a weird it's a weird take, which is why after 14 I've come to dislike WoW storytelling, because the dialogue and the plot are often so basic they might as well come out of an 80s or 90s cartoon show for children. Even today's children's cartoons are more nuanced than some WoW plots, like the Jailer, for example, the big bad guy that probably wanted to do something bad. The other leaders disagreed and sent them off to the maw, and now he's the boogeyman from literally some children's story parents used to scare 5-year-olds. They are not children, they are candle people. And they are not 5-year-olds, they are much older. Defense. I don't know, maybe JRPG creators know how to make a good and interesting story with interesting characters that make long cutscenes a joy to watch, but WoW's story is quite literally these days looking like some 80s children's show with their dialogue choices. I like the 80s, but, you know, whatever. Big problem is not the convoluted story in itself. I mean, I've watched animes that are even more crazy. I just don't think these work fine in an MMO setting. To put it more in context, everyone has a problem with WoW lore now that it went more cosmic. People in MMO want more grounded stories, at least in the West. Being the chosen one that has to fight the gods and save reality is not as easy to digest for people. I myself, too, prefer the lone knight that has to help the kingdom sort of stories. That's a good take. I don't have a problem with WoW lore being more cosmic. I actually support expanding universes since it allows for more possibilities. The issue I find with WoW is the more completely, in a sense, rushed storylines, such as dealing with Ashara and N'Zoth in single patches, or even introducing Shadowlands and the Jailer only to end in a single expansion because we need to quickly move on to the next story. That is a major issue, and the fact that I don't see children's story level dialogue and story to be interesting, which is what you notice when you read the in-game dialogue. WoW especially is played by adults, not 8-year-olds, so there is no reason to have such basic story and characters with a severe lack of depth and nuance. Another thing 14 did great, they didn't rush the Ascians as a big bad of the first expansion and then move on to some new threat. They kept them around and they were still relevant, and the storyline is only now ending after 4 expansions, which made the story so much better. It is an MMORPG. Anyway, it is an MMORPG. You should never completely end the threats, only to pull up some silly way they were secretly surviving somewhere else to bring back stuff for nostalgia 3 to 4 expansions in the future. Another major issue with WoW and its obsession with we need to wrap the story in single expansions. But that's where you're being a little disingenuous to WoW. You fought with Ashara in a patch, but we've been seeing her and dealing with her forces for years, appearances in Cataclysm and Legion. Her servants and the Naga present in basically every expansion except Warless Draenor, and after beating her, we see her again in the raid after. And she's still alive, by the way. And then they hint that she's doing all big brain stuff, protecting the world stuff, since that was her plan all along with N'Zoth. Use his power to save her people, and then wait until the opportune moment to kill him. So your assertion that Ashara was a single patch is just wrong. Same with N'Zoth and the old gods. Could have been a whole X-Pack, maybe. But prior to N'Zoth, please name an old god that wasn't just a filler villain in mid-expansion. Okay, well, maybe old gods should have gotten more airtime because they're ultimate evil villains, except they're not. They're literally just corrupting tumors sent out by the Void Lords. What happens when we kill the lost old god? Oh yeah, the game hints that we've actually attracted the attention of the true threats of the universe. So again, we have a threat that's been ever present throughout all of WoW's game history, resulting in multiple raids and zones and expansions that have revolved around them that for some reason people boil down to a single patch. The Twilight's Hammer and the Old Gods got a spotlight in Vanilla, Wrath, Kata, Mop, Legion, and Biffa. Kata was basically all of N'Zoth's orchestration. Frankly, I don't want to spend 2 years inside a purple turd because we're giving a Void henchlings their proper due or something. Furthermore, there's something to be said about the fact that we knew of Ashara and N'Zoth quite a while before seeing or interacting with them. That slow burn that goes on until the reveal is part of the intrigue. Dude, Nate Gray, you type so much. It reminds me of all the people that complained about the burning of Teldrassil, about how Blizzard was screwing over the Night Elves because they didn't like them and didn't want to tell Night Elf stories anymore. Those kinds of things are in fact the slow progression and drama that everyone says that they like about 14. We had Night Elf focus throughout various expansions, tons of lore of Night Elf lore in Legion, Teldrassil, and then Darkshore and BFA, all the Toronto stuff, and now the connection and lore of Ardenweald, Elune, the Night War, etc. And more details coming. All of that has taken place over like 5 years, and without the highs and lows, would not carry the impact and importance it holds now to seeing them being rescued and restored. I feel like this is an area where 14 has actually struggled because every time our ragtag hero team experiences some kind of conflict, danger, etc., the anime status quo of, but the fans love these guys, throws a wet blanket on a patch later and has us find out, don't worry, everyone is A-okay. I do like its progressing story, but it seems like for every case of a character actually developing, there's another of them being schizo like Thancred, or just being a cameo of, hey, remember this guy? He is exactly what you need. Amaric. That name isn't really familiar for me. I know. I'm like getting sweaty over here, guys. This is spicy. Okay, so this is getting really specific. I think I'm going to skip this part. Sorry, Jason. But, yeah. Very, very specific. Why do gamers hate other gamers? I don't know, dude. It's not, I don't think it's right, but people just, we played these games for years and years and years. And so we feel, we have this attachment to them, whether it's a positive or a negative attachment, and it can swing back and forth. There's a reason why I said, hey, these are video games, not religions. Like, people take this stuff really, really seriously. JC Hart says, thanks. So I started playing 14 a few weeks ago, and just going through the MSQ and the plus sign quest, it can be a bit trivial. My mindset, if different, going into 14, as I just want to enjoy a good story and eventually get into some of the endgame stuff. And while I only care about the endgame stuff and can care less about the story. And that's okay. I think that is an important takeaway to consider, that some people don't play 14 for the story. Some of them want to play because, they're a pro erotic role player and they just want to get their dick wet. Or whatever body part. Some people just want to do the ultimate and savage raids because they get a kick out of that sort of gameplay. Some people want to just do player housing. Some people just want to play a crafting game and they find it more satisfying there than WoW, which does not surprise me. It's not just the story that defines a game. It's just, I've only been talking about one thing, and I think that's a very important takeaway. It's not something that everyone's going to care about. So Thomas Wang writes, your critique of the world maps is confusing because I'm pretty sure the MSQ makes you visit the beast tribes, though there are entire encampments of enemies in the different nooks and crannies around the maps. They sit around campfire, patrol, and do everything else that you mentioned. I'm not familiar with the beast tribes. Sorry. But that feels like more the exception than the rule. Anyway, and I assume you didn't pay too much attention to the fates. Almost all of them have a story attached to them, or unlocks a sequence of progressively harder fates as you successfully complete them. One fate might require you to escort a merchant from one outpost to another, which leads to the second outpost getting enough supplies to raid an enemy camp, and then that spawns a world boss, etc, etc, etc. If anything, 14's world maps felt more alive than WoW's, albeit I haven't played the latter since Legion. But at the end of the day, I don't think either matters much in the modern MMO environment. Once you have flying, it's just point A to point B, which I think is a good point to make as well. The original take that I had was that mob placement and moving around, it lets you see it as part of the terrain. It's part of the ambient noise that you're seeing as you're traversing through the world, and 14 just looks like splatter paint, whereas WoW's feels more like it's handcrafted, it's hand brushed in. Going beyond that, yeah, there are all sorts of like differences, but that was the only point that I was trying to make. Kyle McInnes says, I think it has to get better, but damn, playing through 14, I got to level 9 before I had to do anything other than talk to someone or fetch an item. I mean, I do love JRPGs, but I'm so used to MMOs where you, like, do stuff. I played City of Heroes before WoW released, and played a lot of SWTOR, Maybe I need to get higher, but Final Fantasy feels like a slog even at level 30. Yeah, the very early stuff is rough. It feels really rough, especially if you let yourself get lost in things, but then that's kind of a good thing too, because there's so many different things that you can do. But if you're just focused on like just the story, it's just fetch quests, walk here, and then when you figure out, oh, I can just teleport everywhere, then it just becomes, pick up the quest, first thing you do, open up the quest log, hit the map, see if it has you teleport somewhere, and then immediately go. And definitely, even during Shadowbringers, I feel myself getting lost in the map. Like, I don't know where things are. It helps a little bit that the Crystarium is like a central area, and then you go north, you either fly somewhere, you go north, you go south, and then it takes you to like these places, and then that gives a little bit of familiarity. But largely, like, I'm just teleporting all over the place. Brandon Lang writes, do WoW creators have a summit meeting to decide the week's videos? Yes, but I am not part of that summit. Aeon says, excellent, looking forward to how this works out. Cool. Yano Memo 89 writes, that comment reminded me of a point where the WoW developers were considering making expansions a yearly thing instead of 2 years. It makes me wonder how different the game would be if that was the case. I think this goes back, not exactly to having new expansions, but to just have the opportunity to end stories earlier and then start the premise for a new story afterward. I'd be curious how WoW would feel if they went that route. Hopefully this can preemptively stop the bleeding of players from WoW to 14. From my experience, a lot of them don't come back once they tried 14, so it's important to paint a negative picture so they don't... Wait, what? Hopefully this can preemptively stop the bleeding of players from WoW to 14. From my experience, a lot of them don't come back, blah, blah, blah. So it's important to paint a negative picture so they don't try it. What? The fuck kind of take is that? You think I'm not trying to tell people to not play 14. Good God. I mean, it's free. A lot of it's free right now, so fuck, why not? No, this is bad. No, this is not the intention of what I'm trying to do here. Holy cow. The way things are going right now, yeah, you should like try out other things. Good God. Otherwise you're just gonna hate yourself. You're just gonna grow more bitter and angry and stuff like that. Yeah, don't do that. Or farm anima. Huh. I missed my 10 euros. I could eat something for that money instead of losing 10 hours of doing nothing and just reading because NPCs are not talking and the game looks like shit. WoW with older graphics looks so much better and has much more action and there's more and more, but from my experience from playing FF, I haven't seen anything that's better. So I just deleted and never played it again. Well, you know what? Some people, birds of a feather right? Goosa Comics says, "You gaming shill, you stupid gaming shill, you." Real talk, oh thank God. Real talk, great segment, and enjoyed your calm approach to it all and actually being honest in what you felt about both games. I truly feel that this is the best time for Blizzard to understand not just what their player base wants, but what the market wants as a whole. They aren't just looking at Square and are probably looking at other MMOs too, and that getting a better idea of how to make their expansion tailored to that. At least that is my hope. Keep doing what you do though. It still baffles me about housing though. Man. I know that people are going to bring up, but then they had garrisons and blah, blah, blah. That's not housing. Shut up. I know. I remember what they said all those years ago. And I was like, but I was still like, hey, maybe it'll be good. I'm still burnt because I think I remember when they announced when they announced garrisons that you could rename your followers. And my plan was to rename all my followers after guildmates. And I'll be like, and then later on, I would be like, hey, dude, like I sent you out for a mission and then you failed it. What the hell's wrong with you? Wow, I guess I need to get you levels, huh? But yeah, that was the plan. Didn't work out. Never forgave Blizzard since. But I do absolutely love the pet menagerie. Pet menagerie is the best thing, and the stable. Those are the best things about the garrison, period. Austin Duncan says, Final Fantasy II was my first RPG too, unless you count Classic Zelda, which I don't. Mr. Like 78 says, love the shout out to Radiata Stories and Legend of the Dragoon. My man. Also, my dudes, careful with spoilers. There was a pretty bad one in there. I don't know what that was. I don't know what spoiler it was. Christian N says, I would have to say that one of the most profound experiences between WoW and 14 is its community social engineering. WoW is accessibility and approachability personified in an MMO. It wants everyone to play the game, get to the level cap, and find the lane for their participation in the level cap game. It doesn't do anything to prevent you. The leveling game is a gimme, and the level cap is essentially a right to every player. Once you get there, though, you're thrown into the deep and among a community at varied levels of having solved the game. And depending on where you go, that can get really toxic among strangers. And so WoW's community gets a reputation. It's a great game if you know your limit and play within it. But pushing the limits can be a rough go of it, not just because of difficult content, but because the community can well be colorful. This is a good take, but it's also very measured. I do always recommend people, do the things that you like, and when you want to challenge yourself, like, get ready. The community can be colorful. Yeah, that's a really kind way of saying it. 14 gates everything at the level cap behind the story and its linear feed of cutscenes, mandatory dungeons, which you can partake in with NPCs as of Shadowbringers, and in Divergent from WoW, tests. It is actually possible to be judged unworthy of the game by the main story questline, as you are often tested alone and instanced as a player of not just the character class you chose to play, but in the shoes and vehicle style of other characters. Dude, the other day when I was going through the MSQ and I was forced to play as Thancred as a gun dude, oh god, you're never gonna forgive me for that one. As a gunbreaker, sorry. That was I did not like that. That was a long fight. On the other hand, afterwards, I fight that guy again as my character in my comfort zone, and I was like, oh, it's on, baby. And I was not as bored. It had the same sequences and all that, but that thing was easily twice as long as it should have been, and that shouldn't really get to me. But in the context of, hey, this is Shadowbringers, these are the lessons learned from previous expansions. This is the game that people compare it to WoW and be like, oh, it's great and blah blah blah, and it has stuff like that. It just makes me go, It isn't even 1 2 3. It's 1 1 1, because you can press the same button. That's so cheap. God, I'm jealous. Anyway, These tests happen late in the story after hours invested and no one can help you. Now, I passed them, so go me, but they were not gimmies, and I absolutely know how skilled WoW players that might not have passed these lines before frustration dragged them down. Quick comment, if you do fail, it does get easier. And there are easy modes to those things, and I have failed them. I confess. I failed them because some of them I didn't know what to do. I'm like, oh, I was supposed to walk over there? My bad. And so I would do it again, and that kind of sucks. Anyway, coming from the level cap as a right game like World of Warcraft, this is jarring, and it creates an entirely different community, one that is safe to smile outwardly, earning a reputation as friendly because they know you'll never trouble them in their activities if you don't make it past certain solo tests. Digging a little deeper and conversing with the 14 community has proven this to me time and time again, that's a different kind of harsh than WoW's community and its reputation. Neither approach is ideal or terrible. It's definitely a pick or poison vibe, though. Now, this most of this comment is outside of is outside of my understanding, because it talks about the community, and I haven't interacted with the community. My interaction with the community is dive into a dungeon, pop my righteous fury, and then wall to wall, go, and fight stuff, and then a couple of commendations here and there. So this is hard to respond to. TX Mitz writes, WoW doesn't have a congruent storyline. For new players, you're 50 before you finish a single expansion or story. The quests are sprinkled throughout zones and raids, so you're not even going to see it told in a linear fashion or without interruption, like you suggest. I think that kind of is true right now, where you do still level so fast that you only complete like so much of it. Shadowlands MSQs. Sorry, that threw me off for a second. It's full of menial quest objectives, and you have to go through 4 different covenants if you actually want the full story. I'm leveling in AR content right now, but I honestly don't see that big of a difference in terms of quest activity. It's all just click on random thing and kill random thing. I can't speak for the new expansions, but it's okay to not have a battle royale experience for the leveling content MO. Leveling content needs to be for the lowest common denominator, not necessarily adrenaline junkies. Could there be a bit more fluidity in Final Fantasy's experience? Probably. In Realm Reborn, I know there's a lot of back and forth, which doesn't feel like particularly immersive gameplay. At least in Shadowlands, when you have like Clea following you, the questline proceeds without having to run back to town every single time. Dude, this is what they need. That's something that I wanted to express, but didn't really mention. I talked about talking heads, but the other one is having the quest people follow you. That's a big difference when it comes to the context. How many times have we gone through like some of the duty scenario stuff, and then at the end of the duty scenario stuff, or even like the dungeon duties, and then you have all of a sudden the NPCs that would be with you, they all catch up and they all stand there like, oh, we were here. Yep, we were definitely here. Dungeons are one thing, but when it comes to like the duty scenarios and just anything, just have the quest person follow us. It's not that big of a deal. And there's any number of excuses that we could say, like, oh, maybe it's just an engine limitation or something like that, or something. There are numerous reasons why. But having something like that would just go a really long way towards it feeling a little bit less awkward. Now, that's very subjective. Not everyone would agree with that. But I just feel weird about, the old style of, hey, we're done here. Now we got to walk all the way back. No, I'm not going to walk all the way back. I'm going to teleport because that's immersion. Well, whatever. But anyway. That wasn't the case for many WoW expansions, though, and Shadowlands is an extremely linear leveling experience compared to past expansions as well. For the first time, yes. Afterwards, though, it is so open. It is so... oh, shit. It is so, like, do whatever you want. You get shit on if you don't know mechanics in Savage content. Well, that's going to suck for me because I don't read guides. I don't read. I learned through dying, which will suck in pugs. But anyway, if I had to pick one piece of content that the MMO doesn't necessarily do super well, it would be the world environment in general. I don't need to be in the movie Avatar to feel like I'm in a different world or not be able to take part in the story. I know this was based on storytelling and environment. Could have a small effect on that, but for a lot of long-term MMO players, we were trained to go to quest objectives and call it good. Whether or not there's a dark circle on the ground or there's an invisible circle on the ground like in WoW, the quest objectives are all based on whether or not I'm inside that circle. I do like my character is actually making some facial movements and emotes when being talked to during or certain events. My character in WoW is utterly lifeless, more so than the Final Fantasy XIV landscape. Realm Reborn quest stuff is so far definitely not as appealing as some of the standalone Final Fantasy games, but I think WoW does a really bad job at micro-level storytelling and does a decent job at the macro level. Story is a small part of an MMO, though, unless you're a Chad RPer. Story matters the first time through. The rest is on the gameplay and the content. Nice job on the video, though. Hey man, I'm really excited for this series. I've been playing 14 for a couple of weeks and going through the Realm Reborn storyline, and I found most of the issues you talked about to be true. With that being said, everyone seems to agree that Realm Reborn is necessary to care about the later storyline, and it seems to be the worst part of the game. So I feel you may have hurt your enjoyment of the game by boosting the character. I agree. But this is what this is what I'm working with, and going back, I feel like it would contaminate the experience further. But I think I've gone beyond. I think I've also kind of moved on from the story part of it, and I'm ready to go on to like other things and and other issues that I probably created for myself because I skipped some content. Having played it from the very beginning, the same pitfalls of storytelling and pacing that drag down Realm Reborn are present in new content as well. Whether it's planning a banquet to prove that you can fight Titan, or doing 43 chores to open a way to a castle. Same problems. Noel Dillabo says, I sure like talking about me. Love the episode. Cool. Harrison Doyle says, to start, I hope you at least somewhat liked the game, and I did. I've yet to boost another character for a different data center and had never really thought about someone's viewing the story with just Shadowbringers. Well, I didn't play through. Well, okay. I just kind of went YOLO in the game during 8.3 since some of my friends went to try Guild Wars 2, Elder Scrolls Online, SWTOR from WoW to see which one others liked, and I tried Final Fantasy. Each person plays however they want, regardless of who they whisper. Something like that. I did like the comparison of the key. It was actually kind of funny until I was trying to remember what part in FF you were talking about, and I think you mean the chores you're doing for the pixies, so they can help you stop messing with you and do the stuff in the zone, and then realize they're all lazy and turn to your angry, neglected pixie. I remember finding them both getting to the point where it's like, can we just get this over with? And I know I had taken a break for each of them to go like play Doom or Hades or something, but in my opinion, Final Fantasy, it is meant to feel that way because it's important. The quest is emphasizing the pixies are lazy shits. I wouldn't be able to tell you anything about where I got the keys in WoW or where I got the keys from. It just made me go here and get this over with. The main thing I remember in this part with Final Fantasy was the interaction with the ghost, since he has been in the previous two expansions of character development, and the dragon. Not to avoid that, I probably took breaks from Final Fantasy for other games, with WoW included. I remember most of the Maldraxxus storyline. It starts off it starts off, you're dropped into an arena fight. So, fight. You're dropped into an arena fight. You find out that you're suddenly in the middle of an like a civil war between the different houses. You're saved by Draka. You get shot down. You crawl your way over to your to the House of the Chosen, to kind of take refuge and like, hey, you can help us out because, hey, we're like the good guys here, and we're trying to make things right. So, start going here and then talk to this stone, and all of a sudden you get the MacGuffin sword. And that's where they get the idea of, hey, dude, we can use this MacGuffin sword to open up the seat of the Primus. Oh, well, we gotta get these runes. Okay, let's go get the runes. And so, I get that. But it also kind of cuts the point, too. Anyway, As I do enjoy the video, comparing them has been a bit odd. I think of it more like I play an RPG and turn the MMO on when I want, and I'll just go to other people and do whatever the raid or new or old stuff with randoms and friends. If you want the MMO experience on all the time, you just go do that. And if you don't, you don't. When I did Shadowlands or BFA, it was like when you finish the MSQ or whatever it's called, and now all you have is the MMO. I tried doing the side quest to get someone involved in the story, and it was just kind of far in between where you find one that didn't finish at one quest, and I just ended up doing arena until we stopped playing. A lot of the raids and random stuff is unlocked by blue feature quests along with the way of the MSQ, so I'm not sure how unlocking features work if you just go straight to Shadowbringers, where you would have to go to this place where you never seen before and find this random ass blue quest that someone asked you to try. You just don't unlock it. I just pass everything by. That's how it was for me. The world design, as again, opinion, I think you may be overvaluing mobs too much. And while you can literally pull all these mobs and kill them as a DPS, the only times I felt that there were tons of mobs when there were old world quests associated with that area. And when you go to the same zone without the world quest, it's like 3/4 of the mobs are gone. In Final Fantasy, I played a DPS monk for most, if not all, the MSQ, and can tell you if you pull 2 or 3 random mobs, 2 or 3 random world mobs in 530 gear, there's a chance that you can die. A very high chance. Now, I'm not trying to say it's a lot easier as a tank because Paladin has clemency, while I have done it as Dark Knight for maps around the zone with friends, and those mobs can hurt without a healer or a self-heal. But if you take into account where you would do the same pull solo, you're not going to have a fun time. Now, getting to your other point of adding them to the aesthetics, it really is to each their own. I try to avoid the mobs in game most of the time, and it's just it's just letting them reset in either. For me, it doesn't really add aesthetically, but as you stated, it does for you. I remember the first time I used the map, not knowing that it was for 8 people, and like 3 mobs spawned in the used a map. I don't know what that is. I can't really elaborate on it for Final Fantasy aside from the part where your point for WoW is kick ass and take names later, which is kind of the previous expansion in Final Fantasy for me. I'm not trying to say like play through the story again to do Stormblood or anything along the. I did play Stormblood. So, just try and roll a character on a preferred realm and just literally skip the cutscenes. If it's your alt. Road to 70. I have Road to 70. I have a yada 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 yada. Okay. Tom says, I think I will try Final Fantasy 14. Cool. There are treasure maps that are world group content. Oh, that sounds cool. I really enjoyed this. I played a lot of MMOs starting with Ultima Online, and I don't think there's a really good way to tell a story in a living world. The closest I can think of is Astaria, where the community had to come together to build outposts and push back the enemy forces. It was almost like the whole game was one giant perpetual scarab war experience, and while it worked at first, eventually the community lost interest in the constant drain of time and resources. I agree with Kamikin's statement. I presume that's another YouTuber. I agree with Kamikin's statement that WoW's story is told more in books that only a fraction of people see, and I think that's to WoW's detriment. When Blizzard does focus on actually telling a story, Korthia, for example, even self-admitted non-story people like Preach find themselves enjoying it. The problem, though, is that WoW is constantly escalating the stakes. We went from hunting wolves in vanilla to being the real, genuine, one true Mawwalker, and ignore the thousands of others who share your server. The story team is fighting a losing battle to make the next expansion bigger and better with higher stakes and greater rewards, all under the core of the story is the war between the factions, so we can't ever have everyone realize that, hey, maybe peace should last longer than just the 0.3 patch of each expansion's banner. To make matters worse, the story developers are fighting against the game mechanics push we lovingly call system lands, and the desire to turn WoW into every esport possible, from the MDI to the Great Push and yada yada yada. Okay, but not story stuff. H. Kazumi says, I can't get into WoW. Looking at WoW, it feels like it's made by a bunch of boys playing with G.I. Joes and making explosion sounds with their mouth and dropping corny one-liners. Because it is. WoW is written with the rule of cool in mind. WoW is made by people who grew up reading comic books. 14 is made by people who grew up watching anime and making RPGs, to be fair. Delete DH says, No Soul, the champion of Azeroth, makes anywhere a bed. This is a reference where I said, The champion of Azeroth has no bed. My dude is not Chuck Norris. Okay, so Adam says, I don't know if that bandwagon is going to hold all YouTubers. I assure you, I am alone with my takes as a content creator. Mike says, least watched video of all time with the highest percentage of dislikes to likes. Why? No one cares about some JMMORPG crap. No one cares, but it's the most played MMORPG right now. Go back to getting hyped over a 15-year-old expansion. 10 years, 15 years, whatever, man. Christopher Daffron says, okay, I'll watch the entire video. I know you're not keeping score, but as far as storytelling is, Final Fantasy XIV 1, WoW 0. Look forward to the next deep dive. I'm especially excited to see my comparison video on player housing. That one should be a slam dunk. Just like the comparison between Transmog and Glamour. Slam dunk. Salzman says, this is great, and I'm looking forward to more. Matt Chapman says, hello, sir. Some thoughts I had after watching your video as a long-time WoW player who just got into 14 about three months or so ago. I love your videos and your channel. I look forward to more of your videos, and I hope Bob gets to make an appearance in future videos of this series. That said, some of my own comments. I found your comparisons of the two franchises to be very fair and agree wholly with them both, especially given the background of both franchises. The reasons you stated are why I find comparisons between the stories of each game to be so problematic, as both franchises have wildly different backgrounds, so I often feel it's unfair to compare the two in this respect. I do agree with you about the way the overworlds are presented. Blizzard does put a lot of detail into their outdoor world that 14 does not do. However, I would also be lying if I told you that actually mattered to me personally, which is fine, because that was my personal take too. 14's overworld is barren in comparison, but in my entire time playing the game, I never once felt like that was a negative to me. I never felt that the lack of detail pulled me out of suspension of disbelief. Walking around and seeing like really big creatures, like right now in this last part of Shadowbringers, I'm seeing like big old like rogue Talos robots and giant tree looking dudes like roaming around, and you can see like 5 or 6 of them just kind of like wandering like cows and stuff. In fact, there are many great areas in 14 that have areas that I feel like probably have histories or stories behind them, but the game doesn't really do much to explain what they are or how they work. I would suspect this is because the narrative focuses on your character and not on the world. Whereas WoW is the opposite; the focus is on the world and not the character. That I definitely think is a good takeaway. That with character. Outside of those two items, I have to complain that I felt like the rest of your points you brought up weren't really critiques of substantive, objective, concrete concepts, but rather just matters of personal taste. Because they are. For example, your complaint about how long it took you to start hitting stuff when you first got to Shadowbringers and the slow burn of the story. Your criticism basically boiled down to F14 is really slow at the start of the expansion, and it has me running around and looking at stuff initially, while WoW drops me into a war zone and I get to start hitting stuff right away. That is pretty much what I said. The thing is, that's purely personal preference. There's nothing objectively wrong with either approach, which I've also said. Speaking for me, I felt that Shadowbringers' slow burn was A, not unusual since the prior expansion had very similar beginnings, which is true, and B, wholly appropriate since we are literally strangers in a strange land. Not so much in Ishgard, though. Or, I forgot that first part in Stormblood. You know, the outdoor place where you get introduced into that giant statue up there, and it's like, oh, it's so important, and then everyone gets killed, almost. Noir Mortar says, I'm glad to see you doing this. Love the videos, man. Keep it up. I Lock a Lot writes, what is going on with all the sudden Final Fantasy and WoW content? Bandwagon type of thing? Don't get me wrong, each MMO has its own special something, it just seems out of nowhere. It comes down to this. 14 has lore and characters that you care about. WoW does not have characters and lore that you care about. That's your take, bruh. In fact, most people like me skip the RPG element of WoW. The storytelling as WoW has always been trash. That being said, WoW excels at everything else. There's an incentive to raid in WoW. There's no incentive to raid in 14. There's an incentive to gear in WoW, and there's no real incentive to gear in 14. I hope that's not true, because then I'll get really, really sad really fast. WoW has esports and 14 does not, which I don't think is a bad. I don't know if that's a good comparison to make. WoW's profession system allows you to make things faster. Doing anything in the 14 crafting system is going to take you hours. Most people that craft in 14, like me, use macros, except for the stuff that you can't make without macros. I don't know what to say about the profession system, but just as an initial impression, I don't see. Yeah, I think it's going to be very, very one-sided. Angry the Chipmunk writes, I'm very interested in where you go with the series. You have a very unique view on things, and I think that's good. I may not agree with everything, but that's not bad. That's healthy, as long as we're not fighting in the comments over it. Haha! I really only have you, Talius, and Nevitel, and Begular still subbed to from WoW content creators because you guys keep me in the loop for what's going on in the game. I'm full 14 now and may or may not come back to WoW in 9.1 if it ever comes out, lol. But anyway, if you're reading this comment, what you're reading this comment for, you freaking WoW shill, you freaking 14 shill, you player housing shill, you shill. Thanks. Ningangsta writes, I align with you here. 14 is good, but I don't find it engaging enough and often wish it was more like WoW. The content feels accessible, but not meaningful for me. Ted Atreides says, Lufia, sweet kid, this is why I love your channel. You lived my life. I did live your life. Claudia Zapula says, I personally have played both games for multiple months, and all you see currently except this video is an incredibly biased narrative towards 14. Preaching it like it's the next coming of God itself, while the game has many flaws as well, which get conveniently swept under the rug. The reason a lot of people are talking about 14 is because of a key advantage their dev team has, which is good PR and the players' trust. While WoW has the opposite in a negative way, but looking at it objectively, the two games have just as many flaws. 14 is a good game, mostly good story, great music. Gameplay is definitely not on the same level, and even at max level add on to that's the server delay, and it becomes jarring, even evading boss mechanics, and majority of the zones, even last expansion ones, suffer from their art styles limitations. The majority of zones look dull from a scene composition standpoint, and also flat from a colors perspective. Contrasting with WoW zones, which even the worst expansions always look incredibly beautiful, even just how vibrant the colors are and how they mix. Also, absolutely no one I've seen yet has stated how FF14 is a story game first and an MMO second, meaning that 80% of the game is story and RP content comparably to WoW. There's quite little end-game content. Most of the game's content is either side content or RP. I'm not quite sure what he's saying there. The two games' communities are not that different either. I know that this may come as a shocker to most YouTubers or people simping for 14. The difference is that if we were to personify... this is out of context, though, but... we're almost done, though. WoW's community is like that one rude dude that you know at a glance. He's an asshole. While the 14 community is like that super friendly and welcoming guy, but the whole time he's holding a sharp knife behind his back, just waiting for the moment you slip up and say anything remotely negative about his game or disagree with his opinion before going fully aggressive on you. Carlos Lama says, well, this is a long form video, so a long form answer. I played both. I played WoW since the beginning and quit multiple times. No longer play. Played 14 from end of Realm Reborn to Stormblood and then quit. Returned with Shadowbringers and then quit for good. This is a fairly accurate representation of both games. In WoW, the story takes place in the books, published pre-expansion. In 14, the story occurs while you watch. Not really satisfying either way. To me, the standard bearer for storytelling in an MMO was SWTOR. The base game has the best stories in the MMO space. They aren't as ponderous, and your character is front and center. The Imperial Agent storyline is the best example of great MMO storytelling. The story in WoW is just kind of like a placeholder for the expansion and not much else. I will admit to these story being a significant focus of 14, but I never felt like I was this mythical champion leading the storyline. My actions didn't really have a ton of impact on the goings-on. They both felt incomplete. WoW had much more than 14. 14 is the more engaging story, but by no means this epic tale. WoW just outright falters in terms of storytelling. Interesting take on SWTOR. Like, it's been a long time since I played through, but I only played through the Bounty Hunter thing because it was a tank. And I liked it. But then afterwards, when I was done with the leveling and I got into the actual MMO side of things, it just went, ew. I was like, ooh, I feel not good about about how it plays. And unfortunately, I didn't give it a second chance. I haven't played it since like shortly after reaching max level, so I feel kind of bad there. Elements Fire writes, your Contra analogy is very apt to describe WoW versus 14 style of storytelling. People often complain that BFA was 3 expansions worth of stories condensed into one. Having played through both of the collected keys to open the locked area zones in this expansion, I really feel like I got a better understanding of the history that I had taken place within the FF zone, whereas I felt like I had no time to learn anything about Maltraxxus and was being hurried from quadrant to quadrant while fighting literally every house. What happened to the House of Eyes or the House of Plagues? As I was progressing through the 9.0 storylines and Covenant campaigns, Shadowlands characters felt like they existed to either be disposable or nostalgia bait. The only real exceptions to that for me were Clea and Pelagos, who are both awesome. Big sister, little brother who's trying to get in that, but big sister ain't having it, because big sister's got wings. Matthew Olson says, I like your honest approach, but like you said, there's still a long way to go to completely compare the two, and how you can and how can you not? I myself play both, and I don't see a comparison. I take both games as they are, and like you, I played both from the beginning, console or RTS. Of course, both sides will say this is better and that is better, but in my mind, they are so different, especially in style. I hope ActiBliz knows that they have some serious competition out there and that they are taking notes. Tiago Peluche says, I was looking for someone calmer and more centered to make an honest comparison. Thank you. Looking forward to more, especially when it comes to alts, which is going to be a more interesting conversation to have, because I have no motivation to create an alt or to play multiple jobs, and so that's going to be a challenge for me to talk about. Anyway, Bright Power writes, feedback, too biased, I unsubscribed, have fun in WoW, I am done with this game, I am unsubbing WoW creators anyways, haha. Ricardo Molina writes, I do respect the time and effort you put into this leveled critical opinion, but your bias is evident, but you own it, which is so honest of you. It sucks that it's getting harder and harder to shill for WoW. Is that what you think it is? I wish I could still enjoy it blindfoldedly as you do. I endured most of Mob last patch, WoD and its selfish cam. Legion gave me a bit of hope, but BFA felt like a kick in the nuts. Systemlands, remember how it was promoted, the most ambitious expansion ever made. I sometimes stay in the character selection screen and remember the anima shit and rest, and I play another thing. Keep enjoying WoW, but never go full shill. It might affect the chance to migrate to a new game that can help your channel grow. I do what I want. How about that? Jelena says, I also play both games and love both of them for different reasons. Thanks for your analysis, and I look forward to enjoying the remainder of the project. Nice job. Thanks. El Corny says, you're a brave man, Soul. I really enjoyed this video. As a long-time WoW player who has recently been tempted by the 14 hype and lack of Shadowlands updates, this was really interesting content for me. Thank you. Persian Gamer says, it's all the same shit, really. Both games are grinding same shit weekly. I enjoy 14, but WoW held my attention longer. I totally understand the need for change for some, but if you play WoW not much all week like I do, you still have a ton that you can do. Now, for mega grinders, I understand. Gingerly Gaming says, I've been waiting for Soul to do this. Yeah, there's more coming, I hope. Heedless Thievery says, I want to like 14, but the gameplay is so boring. I'm only at about level 20, so hoping it'll get better, and it does, but at this point, I won't miss it when my game time runs out. 7 replies. Oh, here we go. Why game time, they say? The game has a free trial? Sounds like you jumped the gun on the money. Oh, that's a good point, huh? Yeah, it's free. But I can tell you that it doesn't get any better until level 50 minimum. What's making it feel boring is the global cooldown and the server delay. Play a monk or dragoon at max level with all your abilities unlocked and doing correct positionals every time, then come back and slap yourself in the face. That's a pretty disingenuous argument to make. It's like, dude, man, I'm starting this out and it's like so boring. Like, classes just don't feel, jobs just don't feel fun. And seeing the response of, yeah, dude, just get it to max, man. It's gonna be so much better. You know how far that is, man? That's really far. Let's see. I'll agree that combat is a lot more engaged at max level, but for the most part, and in my opinion, wild combat for most classes feels better, and that is due to it having more action gamey feel and GCD being lower, and the lack of server delay. Personally, I played Summer, Scholar, Dark Knight, and Dragoon at 80 for context. I did jump the gun on the purchase, admittedly. I mean, it was on sale. I think it's still on sale right now. So, I mean, that's nice. But of course, don't buy it don't buy it on sale. That's my as a tip, it's gonna come out in what, 5 months or so. So if you're like just kind of chilling during your thing, just play through the trial. You get you get the base game plus the expansion, and then when Endwalker comes out, buy Endwalker, and then it comes with the Shadowbringers. Amazing. Anyway, the late game mechanics look interesting, but I feel it should also be engaging to get there. That's what I'm just not feeling yet. I'm giving it more time, but I totally get what Soul's saying about the action and story balance. Gameplay definitely and defensively is a slog until at least level 50. Being adversarial like the other commenter here achieves nothing. Dracul says, I loved it. I completely agree that if both games just sort of met in the middle regarding storytelling, both would be so much better for it. 14 needs more action that you play through, and WoW needs more world building and character development. This one thing about the one thing I do appreciate way more of 14 than WoW is how the story is told. I appreciate frequent cinematics and mini cinematics, and smaller walls of text than WoW's occasional mini cinematics, rare cinematics, and frequent walls of text. Also, another topic to maybe compare that I didn't hear is the two games' roguelite game modes being WoW's Torghast and 14's Palace of the Dead and Heaven on High. Maybe things like design, cosmetic rewards, and how each contribute to powering your character and etc. Ginch says, good commentary. I also like the stories as well as the gameplay, however I am not able to play other games. I tried, could not get into it. I dislike that in-depth story is now in books or comics or whatever, but at least we get the in-depth parts. I admit to slow play for this expansion, but that's just me. I've slowed down as the enjoyment to story is low. I have not wished for flying to hurry up so much as I have in Shadowlands. The amount of gliders used is insane. And why? I like to jump off stuff to get away from mobs that I know will kill me, lol. Also, thanks for the little peek inside the game itself, and have a good one. WoW was good, but I'm just tired of their BS. 14 probably also has BS that we'll have to deal with, but so far it's fun. I gave too many opportunities to WoW and the elitist players who tell you cry because you suck, because maybe I suck. But at the end, I'm here to play a game, not to do tedious chores from 9 to 5 anyways. I feel like 14, I can pick up where I left off and spend hours to keep progressing. No Azerite or Anima, that in next expansion will be useless, and all those hours thrown away. So I'm happy leveling classes in 14. I think I found a way that I enjoy. I am really enjoying leveling my character. I have content for years until I finish to level all classes and job, while I go through expansions and their stories. Once I cap all classes and jobs, I will probably find something else to do, but because I do it for fun in my free time, it means I will never finish, haha, so I get content forever. While in every WoW expansion was a new grind, which resources were useless in the next expansion, so yeah, I'm happy in 14. I understand you've been burned one too many times, but the content you state, leveling all classes and jobs, is not a thing that's unique to 14. That's why I miss how it would be practically different from WoW. I know each job has its own story. And while they made me grind Azerite for hours and hours, and for what? It's useless in Shadowlands, and always happens in every expansion. I prefer leveling all classes 1, 2, and thank you. And the story? What story? I skip all scenes. So far, I don't even know what the story is about. I just play the game, I don't watch the story, and if you do that 1% of the story, and leveling all classes and jobs in one character has been awesome. And so some people are just happy, just playing through. They could care less about the story. As for the whole thing about grinding Azerite or AP that becomes useless afterwards, it's one thing or another. It's either, cool, I got this awesome gear, well, guess I'm replacing the gear. I mean, it just happens to be a different thing. I don't want to make any assumptions, but if you're leveling all classes, one could say you're on the more casual side, so why did you grind Azerites or Anima in the first place? I mean, that's a good question. It's like, why did you grind it so hard? Well, at least Azerite. Anima, you know exactly what you're grinding it for. So if you don't want to, don't. It honestly sounds like you're just lashing out at WoW Just to lash out, nothing wrong with the join 14. Also, reminder, your profile pic is still WoW related. So you might want to change that with your favorite Final Fantasy 14 boy. I think there's a line that blurs. You're right. AP is less of a it is more of a in the moment thing, as in it's only expansion relevant. There isn't much. There aren't a whole lot of memories that come from grinding AP, as opposed to you finally got this awesome weapon or something. But my takeaway from that is power is always fleeting. So as you can see, I'm not a 14 fanboy, so I don't follow the story, and I don't have a 14 profile picture. I was so into WoW, that's why I grinded a lot, but for what? For nothing, because it doesn't matter next patch. WoW has fucked up so much. I decided to try other games. So far I'm happy in 14, and if your toxic WoW nature can't understand, that's your problem. But this is one of the things I hate about WoW, their passive-aggressive toxicity. Let me guess, you're thinking about saying, bye Felicia, oh man, I don't miss your kind of people at all. Damn. Okay. Quick question on the small but noticeable difference. Do I appreciate all the classes and jobs on one character, or just change equipment? Do I appreciate all that all classes and jobs on one character just change equipment and you can change your class, or do you like the WoW version of alts and races best? Just curious, sir. I only play one. I only seriously play my paladin. And in 14, I am so far only seriously playing as a paladin. I hope that helps answer your question. I'm a one-trick pony, man. I'm very in character. Bearded Chimp says, I like your breakdown, was thoughtful and as unbiased as you can be. I personally can't stick with 14, just something that brings me back to WoW. Maybe it's the agency my character has and the investment the story puts on me. For me, for this other dude, it's the combat and classes in WoW. While 14 has a lot of great classes, I prefer specs, and while the combat isn't bad, it's too slow-paced. I mean, it's not really slow, but compared to how reactive combat is in WoW, it is. Thiago Milmoens says, this was lovely. Looking forward to the next. Thank you. Elegant Drop says the same thing. I look forward to seeing the rest of the series. Barkasaur says, or writes, 14 is legitimately the most play-it-safe MMO ever. I think the devs have some good player-first philosophy, and the main story is probably the best offering the game has, which then, being an MMO, makes that a snore fest to experience. I actually didn't expect that when reading through this. They have an absolutely egregious cash shop as well, buried in their website straight from 2003. Hate on me all you want, but this is a Soylent Weeb Fantasyland and complete girl bait, matchmaking for virtually everything, and a quote community that gets off on how accepting and nice they are. 2 out of 10. Damn. Oh yeah, the cash shop is miles worse than WoW's, and I do agree on the fact that the community is all nice and welcoming, but as soon as you say anything remotely negative or disagree with their opinion, they pull the knives out and go aggressive. And here we have a real man with a red skull as his avatar to show how badass he is, hating on his girls. Just to throw in a couple of viewpoints in, yes, I will tend to hate on anyone that spews toxic swill like Girlbait and Soylent Ream Fantasyland. I will, however, agree with you that they play it safe. The horrible first version was created in a vacuum with no sense of what the industry in the MMO space was doing at the time. It cost them a ton of money and tarnished the brand, so when they made the crazy-ass decision to rebuild it instead of shutting it down or keep the inferior version running, they had to play it safe. The fact that ARR was built in half the time of any MMO, while simultaneously providing fixes and additional content to the 1.0 game before shutting it down, is nothing short of a miracle. Taking that financial risk of repeating the same bad decisions was not an option, so of course they played it safe. I will also agree that they have a terrible website experience that is very outdated, along with a bad account creation and management system as well. The silver lining about the cash shop is that it isn't pushed to you or even accessible in-game whatsoever. You have to decide to purposefully go to the cash shop on your own, as opposed to other MMOs like ESO, where the Kren store is thrown in your face via in-game menus. Hey, they're free to play though. They kind of can get away with that. WoW, an actual honest-to-God company-sanctioned real money trading token that they allow you to spend cash on and literally buy anything in the game with, including progression. Oh, I guess he means the boost, which which 14 also has, but whatever. And all other kinds of shop games out there. Okay. Koi Trio says also characters in 14 are ... consistent. Like if a plot point changes them, then they change. But in general, they act how storytellers develop their characters. In WoW, characters act weird depending on one expansion to the next, one scene to the next, let alone mentioning how questionable some of the power scaling certain characters undergo between scenes. I guess the best example of this would be like Jaina or something. She was a raid boss, and then now not so much. Pazzy writes, this video hits on a lot of my own issues with the storytelling in 14 as well. I really wish there was a more varied gameplay and actual use of the world in the MSQ. As much as I have enjoyed a lot of the story, I feel intensely disconnected from it because I just feel like mundanely walking from cutscene to cutscene rather than actually playing the story. Generally, it's worth it because I have a friend to play with on the other side of that, and because sometimes it's special like the final area in Shadowbringers, but I wish it felt like less of a slog to me personally to actually get through. Ultimately, I found the WoW story more engaging because I'm playing through it. I find it more exciting because the question is a lot more varied and keeps me playing instead of watching. Hopefully, both developers are watching each other. It's always good to have competition and improvement. Good work on the video. I'll be excited to see more. Fair and calm comparisons can be very interesting. The devs are definitely watching each other. When 14.10 was a flop, the game director changed, and the new one urged all the devs to play WoW to see what a successful MMO was like. Even though that praise was like in 2013 or so, but the new game director that resurrected the game and is still directed to this day is in great relations with Blizzard. He even went to visit Blizzard's offices in California in 2018. Nice. The problem with new player today who goes in FF14 is how they have been told that it will get better. Because of this, I've seen so many people binge the MSQ. The game was never designed to be this way. I don't blame you when you feel the game feels like cutscene to cutscene. There was no indication anywhere that tells you this was the end of the patch. The game was designed to be played as expansion, then go catch up on gameplay until the next patch. For legacy people like me, we've had plenty of time between the MSQ and the patch, so by the time the new story is rolled around, we're all eager to continue the MSQ. Yeah, that's one of the... I mean, that's one of the unavoidable things, though, because you are going to have people that come in later and then an expansion, or several expansions later to kind of want to check things out, and then they're just going to blow through it. And it's the onus of the developer to create an experience for that sort of audience who wants to come in, to kind of like roll out the red carpet and make it not feel as janky. And I don't think it's janky. I think it's flawed. There's a difference. All right. Pazzy says, I'm also a legacy player. I had a 1.0 account, played in the 2.0 beta, and have been subscribed for at least a month during half of the patches since. I've always felt like it was cutscene to cutscene, but kept pushing through for the good parts of the story to play with my friends and the endgame parts. Though I agree it's a big issue for new players. There's a lot of story to get through before it really begins to open up, which not everyone is into. Some people are really there to get to where their friends are, which can hamper the enjoyment of the story leading up to that point. One more thing to add is, like, from one of the earlier comments that I read above this was, I mean, yeah, they have catered and they've made skips and boosts available and all that stuff, or like story skips, like a la carte skips too, which is kind of nice. I was able to skip at least one part of the story, but not all of it, so because I didn't want to skip all of that. Willports says, I like the points. Did you level from 1 to 80 or boost to 70 and then play? I boosted to 70. I like both games, I think, and feel like playing Final Fantasy like I did in 2006, playing WoW and doing my first adventures, ... In my WoW head, I went to FF thinking that I needed to level as fast as you can, but realized I was exploring or reading the stories. Once I slowed or watched or listened to the story, it made more sense and had more meaning. Then I remembered why I loved WoW from the start. The journey was almost as much enjoyment as the endgame. Now it's about sprinting to cap, then Mythic Plus grind and raid until we get bored, and then pray for a content patch. And then let me stop here for a second, because this is something that I find to be a very popular and I guess an overwhelming misconception, that it's sprinting and then going and then grinding Mythic Plus and blah blah blah. I think that's a problem with folks like us, like content creators and WoW heads and stuff, and streamers that push that notion You gotta make it to the end, man, because endgame is all that matters. Like, as if like we're telling you how you should play the game. Now, I admit I do write guides for the audience that wants to do that, and it's a significant part of the audience. But not everyone wants to. Not everyone wants to do that, and it feels unfair to make this sort of assertion that this is what WoW is. WoW and 14, it's whatever you make out of it. People are, a lot of these comments have called me out for like doing the skips or just kind of pushing through without really slowing down to appreciate the story. Screw you, man. I'm going to do whatever I like, just like how all these other people are doing whatever they like. But for me, or for anyone to tell anyone else how playing the game should be, does not sit with me well. I might disagree on certain things, but if someone wants to play their way, who the hell are we to say otherwise? Anyway, this dude goes on to say, most people couldn't tell you a relationship between you and any character in WoW. Class storylines stop, things simply don't matter. How many players log onto alts constantly in this expansion? What I find fresh is that I simply swap main hand and weapon and get a different class. I have already been on the storyline, so don't need to repeat it endlessly. I don't need to email items or worry about soulbound. This is a lot of character stuff. The more Final Fantasy does well, the more Blizzard will need to take a long, hard look at itself and simply not sit on its laurels, watching out the window as players start to see that maybe, just maybe, they need to work harder for your money instead of releasing content far too late and making YouTubers switch to other games to push WoW to get its ass in gear. I do agree on all the points that you listed. Final Fantasy XIV caters hard to the vanilla WoW fans, but at the same time it has faults as vanilla in terms of content. 14 is 90% story and RP, which is great if you like it, but there's very little end-game content in a WoW sense, which is not bad either, just not for me. I'm scared. I'm scared of that line. I ran out of side content to do even after the 2 or 3 months of play. While I was greatly enjoying it, and then I hit max level, and now I was like, wait, where's the content? TLDR, great for RPers, not recommended for PvE or PvP players. I hear that PvP is a meme. I know nothing about it. I'm interested in seeing what it does offer, though. Don't spoil me yet. Never been an RP player, PvE or PvP, and PvP mixed. I simply like the journey at present. I like the storytelling. I care more. And while most quests are accept and click, you don't even read them. The goal is to get to cap ASAP, skipping content, even grind too. Yeah, see, again, like this sort of lack of genuine. And while most quests are accept and click, so is it their fault that they didn't make a cutscene, or is it your fault that you didn't read them? Like, what if WoW decided to go back to the route of making like all the text slowly appear on screen? What if they prevented add-ons from letting you skip the quest? Or what if there's a timer where it's like, boom, here's the quest, and then there's a ticking timer, 10 seconds or 20 seconds where you have to read through it? But they don't do that. When I played in 2006, it was new. It was an adventure, as I didn't know what was at the level 60 cap. That's what I get now coming into Final Fantasy XIV. Fresh, good story, being part of it, and just liking the journey. Yeah, that's me too right now, because I don't know what is... I'm not quite sure what's waiting for me at the end of this MSQ experience. Anyway, no doubt by the time I get to 80 and in a position to make a contribution to rating, the new expansion will be out. Again, giving me more story, not a lot. Yeah, this guy's coming from the stance of, hey, there's a lot of things for me to do because I never played this game before. Surprise! New MMOs have all sorts of content. So many things to discover. Really? Wow. Sorry if I'm making fun of you. Kamikins writes, I'd say that part of WoW's storytelling issue is that a huge chunk of it lies in the books and media that people otherwise wouldn't see, or at least pay attention to. You know what's funny is that the people that really bitch about this run right over to Novel or other YouTube channels, and then they get their fix on it. But then they'll still go back and say, hey dude, this is not right. And I have a good feeling this is a hot take, but I have a feeling that those same people, even if they were given that book for free, even if it was a PDF that was distributed, and I would love for WoW to do more of that. even if they put it on a PDF on the website, they wouldn't read it. They would go to novel. They would go to a channel and have it and get the abridged version done for them. And they would probably say, well, why isn't it in game? Blizz, so lazy. God. Yeah, so that's a tough one to take seriously. Centurion says, OMG, Super Contra. It was not Super Contra. It was the original Contra, not Contra 2, not Super Contra, whatever. WoW 14 shill. Catrell says, hey, dude, I always appreciated your analysis of WoW while I was an active player. Now looking forward to your similar dedication to 14. I'll do what I can. I'll do what I can. Attack Blades again says it's getting a bit of a meme. All the content creators covering 14. Time for a break from online content for a while until 9.1 is out, I guess. It's because otherwise I would be putting out guides weeks in advance because I'm working on a bunch of guides, and yeah, that just doesn't work. So that's a little insight into content creation. Fat Goose writes, as a longtime WoW player who has never liked the idea of Final Fantasy world, story, or feel, but who has been recently starting playing 14 because everyone's doing it, I appreciate this series. Thank you. You're welcome. OMG, The Legend of Dragoon Flashbacks. Oh, yeah. Dark Mistress 1980 writes, the last time I cried in a WoW due to story was the song Daughter of the Sea. The last time I cried due to story in 14 was like last night in Shadowbringers. Every time I cry in 14, I should put $50 in a separate bank account and see what it amounts to. The only thing I hate about 14 is the crafting and gathering. As self-sufficient crafter, this sucks. Interesting. I'm looking forward to seeing what the crafting and gathering ultimately is like, because I hear mostly good things. A player asked Yoshida, hey Yoshi, I love 14, but it's hard to keep playing your game because of the lack of content, and now I'm taking a break. I'm sorry for asking this, but is there a way or a reason to keep playing, or anything that you can teach me how to keep my motivation for playing your game? Yoshi says, it's alright not to play it every day. Since it's a game, you can stop forcing yourself if it's hard on you to keep it up. Rather, it'll just pile up unnecessary stress if you limit yourself to playing just that one game, since there's so many other games out there. So do come back and play it to your heart's content. When major patch kicks in, then stop it to play other games before you get burnt out, and then come back for another major patch. This will actually make me happier, and in the end, I think this is the best solution I can answer for keeping up your motivation for the game. That's it. That's all you I thought you had something to say, Jack. What's funny is that when it was explained to, when the same thing was kind of said to WoW players, they were not happy with that answer. I think it's because when it was explained to them, they used jargon. They said, hey, we accept that, people are seasonal players. There's a there's a cycle to it. Cyclical. There we go. There's a cycle to it where you have like these peaks and valleys, these times where people are like, hey, I want to check things out. I want to play through the content. And then they go, and that's totally acceptable for them. People didn't like that. And see, Keith B says, I thought I had finished Rumbleborn last week and figured out last night I didn't. Until then, the game actually gives you a, hey, this is going to be a very long chain of cutscenes. Warning, I don't like all the cutscenes, but the end of Arr is amazing. I know more about what I'm doing in Final Fantasy after a couple weeks than I still understand about Shadowlands, and I played since launch. Final Fantasy is not a perfect game, but it tells a story much better than WoW, without reading books, listening to Belluar, and of course this amazing channel. Oh, I actually tapped in my free company channel. My WoW guild members, holy shit, stuff just got real. Most of the community puts Rumbleborn story as the worst of the bunch, with fetch quests, which were heavily cut down. The second best is Heavensward, and I know a lot of people cried at multiple points during Shadowbringers. I enjoyed Rumbleborn also, and I'm glad you found it fun as well. Everything you've experienced up to now will not be wasted, but will be built upon further. Happy hunting. Gotta love Shadowbringers. Alex Lyon writes, oh hell yeah, I've been looking forward to this, son of a bitch. Like Bobo looks forward to his personal grease oil massages. Oh god. Late to the party. I'm done. I finished. Well, what happens when I reload though? You're doing it wrong, Soul. As a WoW creator, you're supposed to be bashing WoW and saying how 14 is the greatest MMO ever and the new king. Gotta learn from the master. Click Bellular bait. As usual and expected, you delivered the most balanced analysis of the comparison between the two games. The fact that I agree with you on all aspects of it is pure coincidence. P.S. Why does nobody talk about 14's weird animation locks and systemic spell delay? Are those issues just to me? No, it is not. I will speak to it when I talk about how I feel about combat and classes. I'm still not quite sure how I want to frame it. There's so many... It's an MMO. There's so many different topics for me that I would want to cover. What to do at endgame. I think that right now is probably really high up on the list because it's what I'm going to run into. And this whole thing is about me kind of like, hey, as we go, how am I experiencing these things? And I don't feel like going through the MSQ and going through like those leveling trials and stuff and the leveling dungeons, I don't think it does it justice. I don't think that's right. I've seen other videos, far more successful videos that just say, hey, here's my first time going through a dungeon. Let's see what it's like. I think that's shit because I know what WoW's like going through leveling stuff. It doesn't really offer much. And all I would do if I were to make videos on that, I would just talk shit. I would just be like, wow, this dungeon was great. Those would be bad takes because I would be basing my opinions on just those normal modes. But I don't know, maybe it would have been nice for me to like go through some of those dungeons just to be like, oh well, here's a WoW player's first impressions of the thing, and that's not what I like doing. So this was fun. So this was a wow, I took up the whole stream. Crap, really? Am I going to go through 3 hours of editing? This is going to be a long, long day, guys.